Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Sally Nugent at Buckingham Palace, where the Queen's coffin has spent the night, and John Kay in Westminster. Our headlines this morning. Queen Elizabeth II will make her final journey from Buckingham Palace this afternoon. Crowds braved the rain to greet the coffin as it arrived from Edinburgh last night.
The procession will make the short journey up the Mall to here at the Palace of Westminster, where the Queen will then lie in state until the morning of her funeral. Hundreds of thousands of people are expected to pay their respects over the next 4 days, and the queues have already begun to form.
In other news this morning, the spiralling cost of living continues. The latest inflation figures due out in an hour are expected to show prices are still going up.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, September the 14th, and you're watching BBC Breakfast from outside Buckingham Palace, where Her Majesty the Queen laid at rest overnight. This afternoon, starting at precisely 2:22, her coffin will be moved from here to Westminster Hall, about a mile away, where she will lie in state. And an estimated 400,000 people will file past to pay their respects before her funeral on Monday. Well, today on Breakfast, we will bring you the latest news and images from here at the Palace, from Westminster, and from the growing queue. And we will hear more memories from those who met and knew the Queen. First, our reporter Dan Johnson on Her Majesty's final journey to London from Scotland.
A cheering crowd in the capital city. This has been the focus of much of the nation's grief, and it is Buckingham Palace, more than anywhere, which is so closely associated with the Queen. For so long, her place of work and her official home. Her coffin arrived at 8 o'clock last night, ending the journey from Scotland. In pouring rain, on a dark night, people were determined to give her a welcome.
We felt we had to just come and pay our respects. We was lucky enough to see the hearse pass us, and we've just seen King Charles leave the palace.
Really nice that the flag's flying for her to be back home.
Like she's home, yeah.
Yeah, really nice.
The Queen's coffin is resting here overnight and will then be taken to the Palace of Westminster later today. This is really a last chance for the royal family to be together in private, to share a personal moment with the Queen's coffin before the public lying in state ahead of her funeral on Monday. This was the last leg of the long journey that began at Balmoral. A guard of honour from the Queen's Colour Squadron, silent and solemn in greeting at RAF Northolt. Princess Anne said she'd been fortunate to share her mother's last 24 hours, and it had been an honour and a privilege to witness the love and respect along these final journeys. So then, the drive to the centre of the capital. This was the A40. The car stopped, the people stood. A column of flashing lights illuminated a gloomy evening. The official state hearse was specially designed in consultation with Her Majesty to give the public the clearest view through fading light. For mile after mile, through underpasses and across flyovers, this was the journey back to the city where the Queen was born, where she was crowned, where she reigned over the kingdom and the Commonwealth. And the closer they drew to her official residence, the heavier the rain, but the bigger the crowds. Down Park Lane and past Hyde Park Corner to the place the Queen knew best. Buckingham Palace was familiar before being Queen was even her destiny. As a girl, she played here, and as a mother, it's where she raised her family. It was not, though, where she felt most at home. She regarded it as living above the shop, for this is where she dedicated herself to the business of state. Papers read, banquets hosted, addresses given, the garden parties, the Christmas messages, and the Jubilee celebrations. When she waved and then turned from the palace balcony this summer, many felt her reign was nearing its end. And last night, her coffin was placed in the Bow Room, where the new king met high commissioners and government ministers over the weekend. Then this afternoon, the procession will leave Buckingham Palace at 2:22. the Queen's coffin carried on a gun carriage of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. Crowds will watch as the cortege makes its journey through central London, along the Mall to Horse Guards, then down Whitehall to Parliament Square and into New Palace Yard, ready for the lying in state in Westminster Hall. Members of the public will be able to see the Queen's coffin guarded by soldiers from 5 p.m. until 6:30 on the morning of her funeral. And this is the route along which people will queue, from Southwark Park, along the Thames, up the South Bank and across Lambeth Bridge.
We are expecting extremely large queues that could go up to 30 hours. And it won't be 30 hours for everybody, but I think it's important that before people set off that they know just how long it could take, potentially. So we are supporting people throughout the queue, working with a number of partners, like the Samaritans, like the Red Cross, also having stewards there as well, and working with the Metropolitan Police. So there'll be over 1,000 people per day who will be on hand to support people, to offer them advice, guidance.
And despite the weather, some were prepared to stay out all night.
Yeah. It's sad. It's been very sad. Very, very sad, isn't it? Really sad. But so pleased we came. And we're going to stay tonight and watch tomorrow.
There's determination here to show gratitude, respect and support for the royal family as their private grief gives way to the public demands of national mourning and the rituals of the highest of state occasions conducted in the name of the people. Dan Johnson, BBC News at Buckingham Palace.
Well, it was, of course, Princess Anne who accompanied her mother's coffin from Edinburgh to London. She also released a statement in which she said, "I was fortunate to share the last 24 hours of my dearest mother's life. It has been an honour and a privilege to accompany her on her final journeys. Witnessing the love and respect shown by so many on these journeys has been both humbling and uplifting. We will all share unique memories. I offer my thanks to each and every one who share our sense of loss." We may have been reminded how much of her presence and contribution to our national identity we took for granted. I'm also so grateful for the support and understanding offered to my dear brother Charles as he accepts the added responsibilities of the monarch. To my mother, the Queen, thank you. Well, our royal correspondent Sarah Campbell is with me this morning. And Sarah, in your role as royal correspondent, you have been in Balmoral for the last few days, travelled here to London. I'm just interested to know that sense of things shifting now, how different this feels.
It was a very different feeling in Balmoral, of course, the place that the Queen passed away on Thursday, just Thursday. Very quiet, very intimate, very few people around. I was there when the coffin left the gates of Balmoral Castle and started that long final journey. Those wonderful scenes along the Royal Mall in Edinburgh, and then last night, watching the plane take off from Edinburgh, land here, and then the thousands of people along the Westway, the roads, just people pulling over on the side of the road to get out of their car and watch as the Queen's hearse went past, and then those final scenes going into Buckingham Palace. And there is a sadness, isn't there, that this was the final night that the Queen spent in this building, which is so associated with her. You go anywhere in the world and people will say the Queen's home, Buckingham Palace, so associated with her, and that was her final night spent with her family there. Private mourning. We should also say the staff at Buckingham Palace who've so loyally served her over the years, they will have had a little bit of private time to say goodbye to her as well. And then, as we know, at just after 2 o'clock this afternoon, that private mourning will once again be finished, and she will be handed once again back to the nation for that journey, that procession from here. A short procession, only 38 minutes, and I think it will be very poignant. No music. I mean, we're used to, sort of pomp and ceremony on the Mall, aren't we? This, no music, just the sound of the minute guns firing in Hyde Park. Big Ben will be tolling. The male members of the royal family will be walking behind the gun carriage, so the Queen's coffin will be on a gun carriage. the Imperial State Crown on the top, slow procession, the female members of the royal family in a car behind, and it will make that journey, final journey to Westminster Hall, where, as we've been saying, hundreds of thousands of people are hoping to just be able to spend that short amount of time in her presence for the very last time.
And there have been real moments of, you feel the weight of history, don't you? There have been really real moments over the last several days where you stop and catch your breath. And I imagine this afternoon, as you said, with the members of the family walking behind the coffin, that really is going to be another one of those moments.
Absolutely, and there have been so many. It's not yet a week since the news was released that she passed away, but I still find myself wondering whether it's real. We've seen the coffin now, we know it's real, of course we know it's real, but we go back to the fact that she has been such a presence in our lives for so many years. I mean, here we are standing in front of Buckingham Palace. How many images in our head, how many big moments of celebration have we watched the Queen come out onto that balcony and lead the nation in celebration. I mean, breakfast, we were here, weren't we, 3 months ago on that amazing Jubilee weekend where we saw her at the beginning, those lovely interactions with Prince Louis, her great-grandson, and then that final appearance on the balcony in that vivid green outfit, standing so clearly as she always did. And making that final appearance. And we weren't sure that whole weekend whether she would be able to. It was clear that she wasn't well, but she was absolutely determined to make that final appearance. And there she is with the future of the monarchy. And, you know, we didn't know that it was going to happen in reality quite so quickly, and that Prince Charles, as he then was, would become King Charles III within, just over 3 months.
And it's interesting, isn't it? You say, you know, there we saw her as ever wearing brightly coloured clothes. She wanted to be seen. And as she was driven here to Buckingham Palace last night, the hearse, which had been specially designed, we could see the coffin very clearly lit on display for everybody to see. Even that had been thought through, hadn't it?
By Her Majesty. She was consulted on those plans for that specially designed Land Rover. Yeah, as you say, absolutely. She spent her life. I mean, her mantra was she had to be seen to be believed, and that was in life as it is now in death.
Sarah, thank you so much. I know you're with us for the rest of the morning. There's a real sense, isn't there, there's an added poignancy here this morning, knowing that Her Majesty's coffin has laid at rest here at Buckingham Palace overnight. So do stay with us. Sarah, thank you very much indeed. John is in Westminster this morning, where Her Majesty's coffin will be taken later on this afternoon. John, we see that part of London so often, don't we, on breakfast, talking to our correspondents, but the event happening there today is completely different from what we're used to seeing.
Morning, Sally. Morning, everybody. Yes, just a short distance from the Houses of Parliament, the Palace of Westminster. But it's inside there, inside Westminster Hall, where Her Majesty will lie in state from later today. The coffin will arrive here at precisely 3 o'clock this afternoon. It has all been planned to the second. And then the public will be admitted from 5 o'clock. So let me just run you through what we're expecting to happen. With hundreds of thousands of people expected to queue to pay their respects, there's an extensive area that's been set up to manage the demand already. At the front of the queue is on the other side of the River Thames, on the south side, the Albert Embankment side of Lambeth Bridge. And as more people join over the next few hours and days, that line is going to stretch back further all the way along the south of the Thames, going past Tate Modern and London Bridge, before winding its way to Southwark Park. And the government's warning that mourners could face a wait of up to 30 hours if it gets that long. Now, there will be a wristband system in operation which will allow people to leave the queue if they need to go and get some food or go to the loo. And there is a separate accessible route, a shorter route for people who have mobility issues. So that's the plan. Obviously, things might change over the next couple of days, although the authorities have planned this in so much detail. Nobody knows precisely what the reaction and the demand is going to be. But let's speak to our correspondent Tim Muffet now, who is already on the other side of Lambeth Bridge with the queue, and it has been a horrible wet night, as we've already seen in the capital, but it hasn't stopped the crowds from gathering, has it, Tim? Good morning.
That's right, John. Yeah, good morning to you. It's that quintessentially British activity, isn't it? It's queuing, but this queue, as you say, will be unlike anything anyone has seen before. And these hardy souls are here this morning. You've been here overnight, haven't you? Yep. How important is it for you to take part in this and to file past the Queen's coffin?
I just think it's just a special occasion. I felt impelled to come up here, obviously watching it on TV and stuff, and she was a lovely lady, so to mark our respects, just to come and say goodbye, I suppose, one last time.
And we saw the images, didn't we, last night of the Queen's coffin arriving back in London, and I believe some of you saw that, so you were there in Paddington.
Yeah. I saw it at Paddington.
What was it like to see it travel past you?
Oh, it was lovely. You know, really, to say it was lovely sounds wrong, but it was. It was very... moving. It was moving, yeah. I think that was the first time it sort of hit you properly, you know, you thought, oh, yeah, like, you know. But no, it was very nice, and then we left there and ran straight down here, yeah.
And how are you feeling ahead of your journey through Westminster Hall, which we can see just behind you? What do you think will be going through your mind as you file past her coffin?
What's going through my mind that she gave us 70 years, and that's the least we can do, pay our respect to our Queen. She's been a rock in COVID and anything you can count on the Queen message coming out to us. And even COVID, our message didn't stop COVID, but it does make we feel better. And Christmas Day, we look forward to that message. So it's not like the message is going to change anything, but it's just a comfort. She's like a comfort blanket. So she's not here with us, and we're never going to see another Queen. We're never ever going to see another Queen. So the least we can do is stand in this queue for 24 hours, and rain, shine, we'll be standing here. This is the least we can do for our Queen.
There are a few hundred people here, I'd say at least already. The queue is going down some distance along Albert Embankment. There are wristbands being issued as well, aren't there? So you can keep your place in the queue.
They're doing the first 2,000 people with wristbands, and then after that they're going to see how it goes. But there's a lot of us, we've all met here tonight, we've bonded together just because we're here for the same reason, to honour our monarch. Who has been with us all our lives, is not, literally all our lives. But this lady's travelled all the way from California to be here.
Isn't it? Yeah. I mean, it's unlike anything anyone's seen before.
Yeah, I just had to be here, so to say thank you, really, and to honour her, respect her. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's leave her there for now. We'll talk to some other people a little later. But as I said, these people are determined to be a part of history, and we expect this queue to get bigger and bigger as the day progresses.
Tim, thank you very much indeed for now. That lady who's come from California is going to get a shock with the weather, isn't she? It's been absolutely torrential rain overnight, so a real tough night for those people who've been gathering. Matt will have the weather for us in a couple of minutes' time. But first, let's go to Buckingham Palace itself, shall we? Because our correspondent Charlotte Gallagher is there, where people have been waiting through the night, having seen the coffin arrive yesterday evening. And Charlotte, a challenge with the weather for people there as well, but still a great determination.
Indeed, John. I turned up here at 5 o'clock this morning and I counted 30 to 40 tents, people that had slept overnight, lots of other people in chairs, people who arrived here yesterday evening to say hello to the Queen, to welcome her back to Buckingham Palace, the building which we associate with her the most. I mean, how many times have we seen her step out onto that balcony and wave to the crowds? And they want to say goodbye to the Queen today. And I'm sure lots of people inside the palace, the staff that have worked for the family for decades, it'll be a very emotional day for them as well. Let's speak to some of the people that have queued up overnight. Valerie, you've come from France.
Yes, from France, of the south of the France. And I arrived yesterday at 11 p.m. to do my last goodbye to the Queen. And I go back to France today at 6.
And why was it so important for you to be here?
It's important because Elizabeth II was a very special person. It was an amazing queen, an amazing mother, an amazing woman. And so I'm very touched about all that. And for me, it is your queen, but the queen of the world.
That's so lovely. And why do you think the Queen was so special to people in countries like France?
Because she was a right way, a very proud woman and queen of her country, but the Commonwealth too. And I think we are very proud of this type of woman, and now for men with our king.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Valerie, for talking to us. And I think that's really the feeling of a lot of people down here, John. They want to say thank you to the Queen for everything she did over those amazing 70 years and say goodbye today.
And Charlotte, are some of those people intending to stay there for the next 5 days until the day of the funeral on Monday?
Indeed, John. People are so committed to being here. They wanted to come down, pay their respects. One man we spoke to has actually been in the UK since the Jubilee. He's from Brazil and he came for a holiday. It's extended and now he's decided to extend it even further. It just shows you how much the Queen means to people. They're willing to come down on a day trip from Skegness, Newcastle, places all over the UK to pay their respects to the Queen. And today I think it's going to be really, really emotional when the Queen leaves Buckingham Palace. I know I, for one, when I was watching the TV last night and I saw her come back, it was just so moving. You know, we associate the Queen so much with Buckingham Palace, and I think for a lot of people, probably the first time they see King Charles step out onto that balcony, it might feel quite strange, almost like there is someone very important missing.
They were extraordinary pictures last night, weren't they? And more to come today. Charlotte, for now, thank you very much indeed. We'll speak to Charlotte and the people with her as the programme goes on this morning. If you are planning on coming to London today, over the next few days, wherever you are in the UK, we need to know what the weather's looking like. And Matt has the forecast for us this morning. Morning, Matt.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, once again, a lot of dry weather around today for the vast majority. Southern areas, though, we start off with rain before things gradually brighten up. Let's concentrate on southern areas to begin with. Lots of cloudy around the English Channel. Some rumbles of thunder near the Channel Islands. Heaviest rain along the south coast towards the southeast. But notice how that fizzles out into the afternoon, and we'll see some sunnier conditions develop for most as we head into the end of the day. As for the rest of the UK, some dense patches of fog. Midlands, northern England gradually clearing. Same too in northeast Wales. More cloud around some of these western areas, especially for Northern Ireland, could produce the odd shower. A few showers in northern Scotland, quite a stiff breeze. Feeling rather cool here, but elsewhere, most places this afternoon will be dry with some sunshine around. Temperatures already dropping for the northern half of the UK. Not too bad in the south. Warm enough in the sunshine, 22 or 23 the high. This evening and overnight, though, it will be a much fresher night. Cloud down through eastern districts of England could produce the odd shower, stopping temperatures dropping here too much. But in the clearer conditions, the north and the west, well down into single figures in rural parts, maybe as low as around 2 or 3 degrees in parts of rural Scotland. So a chilly start to tomorrow. A lot of dry weather around, a lot of sunshine too. The cloudiest conditions probably down through some eastern parts of southern England. Small chance of a shower. Greater chance of a shower in northern parts of Scotland. A noticeable breeze. So out of the sunshine, it will feel much cooler. And that cooling trend continues into Friday. That's how it's looking. Back to you.
Matt, thank you. Good morning. We'll have more from Sally at Buckingham Palace and John in Westminster throughout the morning. Now, though, let's take a look at some of today's other news. Inflation is currently at a 40-year high. New figures from the Office for National Statistics are due to be released within the next hour. Ben's with us this morning to tell us more. Ben, what are we expecting?
You're right about inflation being at a 40-year high, John. We've already heard from the government what it plans to do about soaring energy costs, but households are still feeling the effects of rising prices and at the same time, as we were talking about yesterday, wages that aren't keeping up at the same pace. And it's because inflation, that's the rate at which average prices for goods and services are going up, was at 10.1% in the 12 months to July. And as you say, that's a 40-year high. We'll get an update on that figure just after 7 o'clock this morning. But the cost of food has been one of the big drivers pushing up inflation. Grocery prices rising at their fastest rate since 2008, according to the market analysts Kantar. Record-breaking petrol and diesel prices, people will be familiar with that. Those have had a big impact too, although we are seeing those start to fall, albeit slowly. And the new government announced its plan for energy bills just last week. The typical household bill capped at £2,500 a year until 2024. We should say that applies in England, Scotland and Wales. Businesses have been promised equivalent support, but we've yet to see the detail on what exactly that means. Generally speaking, though, our pay isn't keeping up with rising prices. Yesterday, we heard that wages, when you adjust them, you factor in inflation, were down 2.8% in the year up to July. We'll get the latest inflation figure, as I say, just after 7 o'clock.
And looking ahead to Monday, Ben, of course, the Queen's funeral, which we know is going to be a bank holiday, it's being left up to businesses to decide whether they close or not.
Yes, and Center Parcs has seen a bit of a backlash over its handling of that decision. Like many employers, it wanted to close to allow staff to have the day to mark the Queen's funeral. They had said that guests already staying at their Center Parcs resorts would have to leave for 24 hours and then come back. New arrivals would have to delay the start of their holiday by 24 hours. An angry reaction to that has forced them to do a partial U-turn. Center Parcs now saying people who are already on site will be allowed to stay, but those who are due to arrive on Monday will still have to delay the start of their break. It's worth just mentioning a lot of businesses will be closed on Monday, including some major supermarkets, some cinemas and some leisure centres. So it's probably just worth checking with yours about what their plans are.
OK, Ben, thanks very much for the update. Ukraine is continuing to recapture large swathes of territory in the Kharkiv region, but accusations of torture and brutality by Russian troops have been made in newly liberated areas. Our correspondent Hugo Bechega is in Kyiv. Hugo, what more can you tell us about these claims?
Yeah, John, in some of these liberated villages, we're starting to hear some dramatic accounts of life under occupation. These are places that had been invaded by Russia at the very beginning of the war. And I saw a man who said he was taken away by Russian forces after they found a picture of his brother wearing uniform. He said he was given electric shocks. A pensioner said he wouldn't leave the basement of his house and that he and his family lived in fear because Russian forces were grabbing people from the streets to be tortured. So now that Ukrainian authorities are returning to those villages, they are starting to hear those allegations. They're now gathering evidence. They found bodies buried in various locations. So I think there is a long way ahead for these investigators returning to those liberated villages. But I also think that the Ukrainians think they've got the momentum to go ahead with this counteroffensive. They say the goal is to reclaim all territory that's been occupied by Russia, including territory that was invaded in 2014. They think they've got the weapons to do that. They've been telling Western partners that they need more weapons, but it is not going to be easy or quick as the Russians occupy a fifth of this country.
Hugo Bechega with the latest in Kyiv this morning. Many thanks for that. Some staff at Clarence House have been warned their jobs are at risk following King Charles's accession to the throne. A royal spokesperson said some redundancies were unavoidable because of the change in role for Charles and his Queen consort Camilla, who will now move to Buckingham Palace. The Guardian newspaper claims dozens of staff were told the news during the Thanksgiving service for the Queen in Edinburgh on Monday. The boss of Transport for London, which runs buses, tubes and some trains in the capital, has said the coming days will be the organisation's biggest ever challenge. The TfL Commissioner, Andy Byford, said the network had coped with enormous pressure in the past, like the London Olympics, but that it is much harder to predict the size and movement of crowds of royal mourners. Passengers are being asked to leave extra time and to be patient. Now, English football resumed last night after the weekend's fixtures were postponed following the death of Her Majesty the Queen. There was a full programme in the Football League, while Liverpool and Tottenham were both in action in the Champions League. There was a moment's silence at Anfield ahead of Liverpool's fixture against Ajax, which was largely well observed. Liverpool left it late to find a winner. Travel and weather where you are this morning.
Good morning, you're watching BBC Breakfast. Her Majesty the Queen has just spent her final night here at Buckingham Palace. Her coffin was brought from Edinburgh yesterday evening and huge crowds were here to witness that moment. We're expecting even bigger crowds today when Her Majesty is taken to lie in state at Westminster Hall. We can now show you the route. The coffin will leave Buckingham Palace on a horse-drawn gun carriage at 22 minutes past 2 this afternoon and travel very slowly along the Mall, across Horse Guards Parade and then down Whitehall. The King and other members of the royal family will walk behind the carriage and the procession will arrive at Westminster Hall at precisely 3 o'clock. The hall will be open to the public from 5 and we are expecting around 400,000 people to file past Her Majesty as she lies in state for 4 days. Well, our reporter Graham Satchell was here at Buckingham Palace last night when Her Majesty's coffin was brought back to her London home.
There were umbrellas everywhere at Buckingham Palace, the rain relentless. Definitely weather for wellies. This is Katie with her children Ava and Leo.
It's just such a monumental moment in history for me, my mum, and then for the next generation. And it's something we'll always cherish as a memory, and especially doing it all together. We've all got different stories and it's just a really special moment.
For more than 5 days, crowds have been gathering here, the Queen's official residence, but it's felt strange knowing the palace is empty. So there was nervous anticipation at the Queen's imminent arrival.
The whole world's eyes are here today because of the kindness, of the love, of the unity, of everything that's good that's British is her. And coming here today when she's not actually here feels like a little bit empty, but having everyone around makes it a little bit easier to bear.
Shirley was here with her family. What did the Queen mean to you?
Like if it's my mom. I cried today because being here, it's so emotional, honestly. It's a lifetime history.
I think it'd be emotional, you know. She's amazing, isn't she? So she was our queen. We've travelled from Rotherham to look at it, so we got wet through. It's got to be worth it, hasn't it?
As day turned to night, the crowds moved into position and became quiet, ready to welcome the Queen home. There were brief moments of cheering, but near the gates it was silent. People straining every sinew to capture the moment.
It was very emotional, a bit choked. I didn't know what the protocol should be, whether you should cheer, whether you should... I don't know, I just didn't know really what to do.
Only after the Queen had passed through the gates was there a release and applause.
I felt more emotional than I thought I'd feel. Just immense sadness, and I was thinking about it as well in terms of like monarchy and is it just symbolism? But I think this today proves that it's not just symbolism. It brings people together. It's not political, so there's no major divide. Everyone's on the same page, and we look forward.
Everyone's really come together. You feel like you've sort of just had a sort of out-of-body experience all together. It's a real surreal moment, and yeah, one that won't be forgotten, that's for sure.
Seeing her actual coffin in person.
Oh, isn't it moving? I just hold my feelings in words and bless her. May she find a rest in peace. God rest her soul.
For many here, seeing the Queen's coffin, a profoundly sad and solemn moment. Graham Satchell, BBC News at Buckingham Palace.
Incredible scenes here at Buckingham Palace last night. And a full rehearsal for the procession of the Queen's coffin took place in the early hours of yesterday morning, with hundreds of servicemen and women taking part. Well, our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale is at Wellington Barracks for us this morning, which is just the other side of St James's Park from where I'm standing now. And Jonathan, the pressure is on those men and women today.
Yeah, they are looking for precision. This procession involve all three services, the Army, the Royal Navy and the RAF taking part. As you can see, activities happening here at Wellington Barracks already. We've seen the horses go out for exercise before they take part. And just to give you a sense of what will happen, so we will see some of those dismounted household cavalry units at the palace waiting for the Queen's coffin to come out at just after 2 o'clock. That coffin will be carried by members of the Queen's Company, the Grenadier Guards, loaded onto a gun carriage of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, and then they will make that procession, the carriage followed by the King and members of the royal family, down the Mall, down Horse Guards, down Whitehall to the Palace of Westminster, where the Queen, we know the coffin will be there, lying in state right up until the day of the funeral itself. Each time, each minute will be marked by a gun salute. There will be 38 rounds fired in all, which gives you a sense of how long this is going to take them from the palace just round the corner here down to the Palace of Westminster. This is a big day, an important day for the women and men of the armed forces who are taking part. And they have got to get this to perfection, and they've got to get it right, and they want to honour the Queen, who was the person they swore allegiance to when they joined the services.
And Jonathan, we're just seeing images now of the rehearsal that happened in the early hours of yesterday morning, and I know, of course, this is something that probably has been years in the planning, but for the last few days and for the days to come, there is still an awful lot more work to do, isn't there?
Yeah, you're right. They've had plans, what they call Operation London Bridge, in place for many years, but the day has now arrived and they are having to put those plans to perfection and get everything right. Just to give you a sense of the scale of the military involvement, there are more than 5,000 military personnel are going to be involved over the next few days, including the funeral, both here in London and in Windsor. And they have had to bring some of those military personnel from abroad. They're on deployments. Remember, most of these people, most of these women from the services involved in the next few days were doing other jobs. So, for example, as I said, members of the Queen's Company, the Grenadier Guards, the unit that will carry that coffin on to the gun carriage, onto where the Queen will lie in state in Westminster Hall. They were in Iraq until a few days ago. So it has been a massive logistical operation for the armed forces to get everything in place for these days that are coming up.
Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. That's Jonathan Beale reporting live for us from Wellington Barracks this morning, just a short distance from where we are at Buckingham Palace. Now, we all know that our coins, banknotes and stamps are going to change to feature images of the new King, Charles III. Well, that is, of course, going to take quite a long time, but we're likely to see a much faster change to some of the jars and packets in our kitchen cupboards, as our Consumer Affairs correspondent Coletta Smith reports.
These aren't just any old cornflakes. They're toasted, filled, boxed, sealed and sent with a very unique mark.
We're really, really privileged to have had the royal warrant for the whole of the Queen's reign. And in fact, we had the royal warrant for her dad, King George VI.
As an American company, having a royal warrant has been Kellogg's gateway into the British establishment.
So nowadays the royals get their cereal from us through their normal grocery supplier. But 2 decades ago we had someone called Helen in our customer service team, and it was her job to take the order from Buckingham Palace. And then we had someone who took a van, specifically called Genevieve, the van had a name, to deliver the food directly to Buckingham Palace.
Kellogg's are one of more than 650 companies who supplied products to Queen Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh. When it comes to stamps, coins, banknotes and letterboxes, the image on the front will gradually change, but you'll still be able to use everything with the old Queen on. But royal warrants are different. It's one of the most basic ways that the monarchy touches our everyday lives, because in pretty much every kitchen or bathroom in the country, there's likely to be one of these products with the Queen's crest on it. But now that Queen Elizabeth has passed away, all of this could be about to change.
We'll see different brands, the new emerging brands that are more ethical or more sustainable, connect with the consumer in different ways. And then there will be some brands that the consumers might not connect with and might not have their warrants reissued.
Benson & Hedges and Silk Cut lost their warrant in the 90s when smoking became much more controversial. But despite a shift in focus, Amna Khan, a senior lecturer in consumer behaviour, thinks that royal warrants are here to stay.
That's the best endorsement that any product can get, that they are associated with royalty. Because if you look at any other logos, really they want to say that they are different and distinct, and it doesn't get much more distinct than the royal family.
Crown Paints have supplied the last two monarchs, with Queen Elizabeth paying a visit in the 60s. Here in Lancashire, the company say it's not just about prestige and boosting sales.
Partly as a result of holding the royal warrant, we attract some really good people to come here and work at Crown, and they stay for an awful long time. We refer to ourselves as the Crown family. There's lots of people here who have family that have worked here for generations, that worked here when the Queen came to visit in the 60s.
Crown are hoping their ethos and heritage will be enough to secure their royal connection, but nothing's a given.
What they do is they give you a 2-year grace period where you can phase that coat of arms out, and it remains to be seen whether we will phase that in for the new King's coat of arms or whether that will need to be removed entirely.
As King Charles, the Queen Consort and Prince William now decide which businesses are in the mix, warrants may begin to take on a different shade. Coletta Smith, BBC News in Darwin.
It is 7:15 exactly. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News in a very peaceful, quiet Buckingham Palace here this morning, where the Queen's coffin has laid at rest overnight. And let's go to Westminster now, where John is. And John, an emotional and historic day lies ahead of us.
It really does, doesn't it? The coffin of Her Majesty will be moved from where you are, Sally, at Buckingham Palace, down here to Westminster Hall this afternoon. It will travel along the Mall. We'll get here at exactly 3 o'clock. But our correspondent Nick Beake is on the Mall for us this morning. And Nick, it's a place where we've seen people gathering over the years for coronations, celebrations. They were there for the Jubilee only a few weeks ago. But the mood today, very different.
Good morning, John. Yes, it certainly is. Of course, this is such a famous thoroughfare, a place that conveys national sorrow and joy depending on the occasion. And as you say today, there is a sombre mood among the people who've made their way here already. And we can talk to a few people who've been here since very early in the morning. That light has just arrived in the last 20 minutes or so. Let's just have a chat first of all with Fleur. Fleur, you're 7 years old. You're here with your mum this morning. Can you just explain how you're feeling today? You were telling us earlier.
Well, because it's very sad that the Queen died, and she might be the only Queen ever in our lifetime, and she's a lovely person.
And your mum woke you up very early this morning to be down here. Well, let's talk to someone else who's seen so many royal occasions. Sally, you're from Hampshire. There is some connection with the Queen because you received a telegram from Her Majesty last year for your 60th wedding anniversary. What was that like?
Oh, great privilege to have received it. I couldn't believe that she could remember us.
And today, what compelled you to come here to bid farewell to Queen Elizabeth II?
We owe her a great deal, and I just feel that this is the last time that we'll actually see her, and we've seen her many times. So, very privileged to be here.
You actually saw the Queen's coronation?
Yes, we did. I was a child and came with my mother.
And so when you think about what she's given to the nation over all these years, how do you try and encapsulate that life, that service?
If we could all take an example from her, I think it would be a much better world.
And in terms of what we can expect today, we've seen some scenes of
jubilation really at Buckingham Palace in terms of people singing for the King when he's been here over the past few days. But do you feel that the mood today will be different?
Yes, I think so. I think it will be quite sombre. Elated that we have a king, but I do really feel that from my own point of view it will be a very sombre occasion to say farewell.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much to both of you for speaking to us this morning. So John, as you can see, people are already lined up here, and this is a scene that's replicated in different parts of the Mall. They've still got quite a few hours to wait, as we know, but people thought it was important to get here, to find a place, see history, but also pay their respects to the Queen.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. We'll be back with you a little bit later. Thanks for now. Of course, London has been the scene of many joyful royal occasions over the years. As Nick was saying, jubilees of Queen Elizabeth's reign. And I'm joined now outside the Palace of Westminster by the Reverend Lucy Winkett, who's a rector of St James's Church in Piccadilly. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You've not come far from Piccadilly, but you've had quite a journey, haven't you? Which, just tell us about it, because it sums up the kind of extraordinary security operation that's in place here.
Well, of course, I mean, I think they really are expecting unprecedented queues today. So, I mean, obviously streets are often shut for events like this, but actually it's really properly shut right around the area. So it's an odd thing. I mean, I've lived in central London for a while, being a vicar there, but this is particularly comprehensive, I would say.
Yeah, and just standing outside the Palace of Westminster here, I mean, often for state opening of Parliament or for the budget or leadership contests, you get lots of security, lots of media. I've never seen it like this. I mean, it's locked down, there are soldiers everywhere, lots of police. It's quite overwhelming, isn't it?
It is, but I think it's the numbers of people that are going to come and join this queue, which of course they're saying will take 30 hours. I think that's the extra ingredient, if you like, in this particular event, and just shows what people thought of the Queen.
Indeed. Tell us about your relationship with the Queen, because you were involved in, we were talking about a previous Jubilee.
Yes, I was at St Paul's Cathedral for a time, and part of my duties there was to organise the Golden Jubilee back in 2002. So and obviously the royal family came to St Paul's Cathedral for many different events, but what was always apparent, even amidst huge ceremonial and lots of other events going around it, concerts and parties and all that kind of thing, the thing for the Queen that was always the most important thing was the religious service. So we, as the staff at the Abbey right now, would be really crafting that carefully with her in mind.
For the funeral, yeah. You could always see when the Queen was attending any kind of religious service how seriously she took it. She was in that moment.
Very much so, and she was of the generation that knew the prayer book off by heart. So there's one quite long prayer called the General Thanksgiving, which is in the Book of Common Prayer, and if that was ever part of a service, the Queen would simply say it without looking at the service order. So it was apparent that it was just part of her life, her daily life. It wasn't just going to church on a Sunday.
What do you make of the scenes of the last few days? I mean, the coffin arriving back in London last night, people sleeping in pouring rain on the banks of the Thames to pay their respects today. It's remarkable, isn't it?
It is remarkable. I think that in terms of the ceremonies of the church, they are recognisable, they're familiar, whether that is a tiny crematorium or whether it's this. And the ceremonies are the same, that the coffin is given dignity and that people will be quite shocked often the first time they see the coffin, and it seems to me that it's very important that the Queen will be lying in state for this time, and has also been partly brought back from Scotland and all of those parts of her journey. That's been an important element in this, because she very famously said, "I have to be seen to be believed." And I think for anybody who's buried a loved one, you know that when you witness the carrying of the coffin, that's when it becomes real for you. So I think that there's a strong kind of pastoral reason for this part of the ceremony.
It's interesting. A lot of people have said that to us this morning, to our reporters, that it's only when they saw the hearse last night that they truly accepted that everything had changed and that she'd gone. Well, what are your parishioners saying to you about how they're dealing with this? Because even people who haven't necessarily had a direct connection with the Queen, are they telling you they're still deeply affected by it?
There's a huge variety of reactions, but again, I suppose what I would want to say is that this is amplified, but in fact it's when anyone precious dies, the people close to them have a whole variety of reactions. So there's no uniform reaction, and I don't think there should be. So, and I think everyone should be allowed their own reaction to this. I suppose one of the striking features is that some people have been taken aback a bit or surprised by the strength of their feeling in different ways. And I think maybe because the Queen had been the Queen for such a long time and she was 96, there's a kind of, it's not a surprise, but it's a real shock. And I think people have been just recalibrating the world, their own world around this particular event.
Reverend Lucy Winkett, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Breakfast. Thanks for getting through the road barriers and closures and making it here. Lovely chatting with you. Thank you for your time. I think I've got a live picture to show you of the Mall now, which gives you an idea of how wet it has been overnight. We've been hearing from people who've spent the night on the banks of the Thames and along the Mall in tents. They're soaking wet. Some of them are prepared to stay till Monday, till the day of the funeral. It's quite a challenge they face over the next few days, but Matt's got the forecast for all of us. Good morning, Matt.
Thank you. Good morning. Another dry and reasonably sunny day for the vast majority today, but different story across southern areas. We start with cloud and outbreaks of rain this morning before things brighten up. Cloud there on the satellite imagery at the moment, but at long last it's starting to take a shift southwards and eastwards. That said, if we concentrate on southern areas to begin with, outbreaks of rain, particularly around English Channel coast in the southeast, some heavy bursts around, rumbles of thunder close to the Channel Islands, but notice how most of that will fade away through the day. Sunnier conditions will develop from the north. As for the rest of the country today, a few mist and fog patches around across the Midlands, northern England especially. They will clear by mid-morning. A bit more cloud around some of these western areas, particularly Northern Ireland, Irish Sea coast. The odd shower here. A few showers in northern Scotland too, but many places will be dry with some sunshine this afternoon, but feeling a bit cooler than recent days with the breeze picking up in the north, whereas further south we'll see temperatures actually a bit higher than yesterday. More sunshine, 22 or 23. Into this evening and overnight, areas of cloud running down through eastern counties of England could just bring the odd shower. More showers in northern Scotland, but with clearer conditions developing for many, it's going to be an even fresher night than we've had so far. Temperatures could get as low as 3 or 4 degrees in some parts of Scotland, still staying in double figures further south. And then beyond that, well, let's start with a look at London. A lot of eyes on the capital over the next few days. Dry weather, just a small chance of a shower, but temperatures dropping by day and by night. These are nighttime temperatures compared to how we started this week. By the time we hit the weekend, some rather chilly starts with temperatures in single figures. And that cooler air is coming in from the north for all of us as we go through the next few days. The chance of a few showers comes through little areas of cloud running down through the eastern coast and along the North Sea. We could see a bit more cloud, in fact, through East Anglia, South East tomorrow. Only a small chance of a shower here. Greater chance of a shower in northern parts of Scotland. Isolated ones in the west. Most of you tomorrow, though, having a dry day, sunshine around, but already temperatures starting to drop. Pleasant enough in the sunshine, but it's out of it. You'll probably notice it more than anything else. Only 11 to 13 degrees in northern Scotland, 18 or 19 in the south. Cooler still into Friday. Greater chance of some heavier showers running down eastern counties of England. Again, very close to London, mainly though towards the east of London itself. Further north and west, most places will be dry, but we will see those temperatures continue to drop way down what we normally expect for this stage in September. Feeling cool as well this weekend in the cloudier moments. Isolated showers. Most places, though, will be dry.
Thank you very much indeed, Matt. It really does feel like autumn is here with great effect, doesn't it? In the next few minutes, we're going to explain to you what's going to happen today. We'll explain how the Queen's coffin will be brought from Buckingham Palace, accompanied by the royal family, here to the Palace of Westminster, where she'll lie in state for the next few days. We'll have all the information you need, but first, let's get the news, the travel and the weather where you're watching us this morning. See you in a moment.
Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Sally Nugent at Buckingham Palace, where the Queen's coffin has spent the night, and John Kay in Westminster. Our headlines this morning. Queen Elizabeth II will make her final journey from Buckingham Palace this afternoon. Crowds braved the rain to greet the coffin as it arrived back from Edinburgh last night.
Morning, everybody. Yes, that procession will make the short journey up the Mall to here at the Palace of Westminster, where the Queen will then lie in state until the morning of her funeral. And hundreds of thousands of people are expected to pay their respects over the next 4 days. The queues have already begun to form.
In other news this morning, the spiralling cost of living continues. The latest inflation figures due out in the next few minutes are expected to show prices are still going up.
Good morning. It is Wednesday. It's September the 14th, and you're watching Breakfast from BBC News from outside Buckingham Palace, where Her Majesty the Queen laid at rest overnight. This afternoon, starting at precisely 2:22, her coffin will be moved from here to Westminster Hall, about a mile away, where she will lie in state, and an estimated 400,000 people will file past to pay their respects before her funeral on Monday. Well, today on Breakfast, we'll bring you the latest news and images from here at the Palace, from Westminster, and from the growing queue, and we will hear more memories from those who met and knew the Queen. First, our reporter Dan Johnson on Her Majesty's final journey to London from Scotland.
A cheering crowd in the capital city. This has been the focus of much of the nation's grief. And it is Buckingham Palace, more than anywhere, which is so closely associated with the Queen. For so long, her place of work and her official home. Her coffin arrived at 8 o'clock last night, ending the journey from Scotland. In pouring rain, on a dark night, people were determined to give her a welcome.
We felt we had to just come and pay our respects. We was lucky enough to see the hearse pass us, and we've just seen King Charles leave the palace.
Really nice that the flag's flying for her to be back home.
Like she's home, yeah.
Yeah, really nice.
The Queen's coffin is resting here overnight and will then be taken to the Palace of Westminster later today. This is really a last chance for the royal family to be together in private, to share a personal moment with the Queen's coffin before the public lying in state ahead of her funeral on Monday. This was the last leg of the long journey that began at Balmoral. A guard of honour from the Queen's Colour Squadron, silent and solemn in greeting at RAF Northolt. Princess Anne said she'd been fortunate to share her mother's last 24 hours, and it had been an honour and a privilege to witness the love and respect along these final journeys. So then, the drive to the centre of the capital. This was the A40. The cars stopped, the people stood. A column of flashing lights illuminated a gloomy evening. The official state hearse was specially designed in consultation with Her Majesty to give the public the clearest view through fading light. For mile after mile, through underpasses and across flyovers, this was the journey back to the city where the Queen was born, where she was crowned, where she reigned over the kingdom and the Commonwealth. And the closer they drew to her official residence, the heavier the rain, but the bigger the crowds. Down Park Lane and past Hyde Park Corner to the place the Queen knew best. Buckingham Palace was familiar before being Queen was even her destiny. As a girl, she played here, and as a mother, it's where she raised her family. It was not, though, where she felt most at home. She regarded it as living above the shop, for this is where she dedicated herself to the business of state. Papers read, banquets hosted, addresses given, the garden parties, the Christmas messages, and the Jubilee celebrations. When she waved and then turned from the palace balcony this summer, many felt her reign was nearing its end. And last night, her coffin was placed in the Bow Room. where the new king met high commissioners and government ministers over the weekend. Then this afternoon, the procession will leave Buckingham Palace at 2:22. The Queen's coffin carried on a gun carriage of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. Crowds will watch as the cortege makes its journey through central London, along the Mall to Horse Guards, then down Whitehall to Parliament Square and into New Palace Yard, ready for the lying in state in Westminster Hall. Members of the public will be able to see the Queen's coffin guarded by soldiers from 5 p.m. until 6:30 on the morning of her funeral. And this is the route along which people will queue, from Southwark Park, along the Thames, up the South Bank and across Lambeth Bridge.
We are expecting extremely large queues that could go up to 30 hours. And it won't be 30 hours for everybody, but I think it's important that before people set off that they know just how long it could take, potentially. So we are supporting people throughout the queue, working with a number of partners like the Samaritans, like the Red Cross, also having stewards there as well, and working with the Metropolitan Police. So there'll be over 1,000 people per day who will be on hand to support people, to offer them advice, guidance.
And despite the weather, some were prepared to stay out all night.
It's sad. It's been very sad. Very, very sad, isn't it? Really sad. But so pleased we came. And we're going to stay tonight and watch tomorrow.
There's determination here to show gratitude, respect and support for the royal family, as their private grief gives way to the public demands of national mourning and the rituals of the highest of state occasions conducted in the name of the people. Dan Johnson, BBC News at Buckingham Palace.
So those are the scenes overnight. But it was Princess Anne who accompanied her mother's coffin from Edinburgh to London yesterday. She also released a statement in which she said the following words: "I was fortunate to share the last 24 hours of my dearest mother's life. It has been an honour and a privilege to accompany her on her final journeys. Witnessing the love and respect shown by so many on these journeys has been both humbling and uplifting. We will all share unique memories. I offer my thanks to each and every one who shares our sense of loss." We may have been reminded how much of her presence and contribution to our national identity we took for granted. I'm also grateful for the support and understanding offered to my dear brother Charles as he accepts the added responsibilities of the monarch. To my mother, the Queen, thank you. Well, our royal correspondent Sarah Campbell is here with me at Buckingham Palace this morning. Such a hugely personal statement there from Princess Anne.
Yes, and of course Princess Anne not only accompanied the coffin from Edinburgh, but she was with her, as she said in that statement, in those final 24 hours in Balmoral. And thinking back, that was only Thursday that the Queen passed away there. Such a beautiful, beautiful part of the country, and what a journey it has been from there, from the private residence, the place that we know she loved so well, a place that she could, they talked about her hanging her crown on the gates of Balmoral and just going in and being herself. Leaving there, travelling to Edinburgh, lying at rest there, allowing thousands of people to spend some final moments with the Queen, and then that hugely poignant flight taking off from Edinburgh yesterday, the sight of that huge C-17 plane with that tiny coffin on board, and then landing at RAF Northolt. And the drive from RAF Northolt, I mean, you'll know this part of London, it's so busy, that road is so busy, but people were stopping their cars, getting out of their cars, just wanting to watch the procession, the hearse as it passed by. And then arriving here last night, the rain coming down, people standing outside waiting for it. And I think you could see it, couldn't you, the emotion in their faces. And people have said that it wasn't really until they saw the hearse, saw the coffin, and really then the magnitude of the moment really struck them.
And that moment last night, the images that we've just seen in Dan Johnson's report, the moment when the hearse drove through those gates, that was really something, wasn't it? Because that, I think, marked the kind of the start of a few hours where Her Majesty was private again, not on, public display. The hearse had been so public, hadn't it? And that marked maybe the last few hours for the family, for the staff, as you say, to have some quiet time here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is a very public event, isn't it? It's a global event. But the family have been able to, at times, those first few hours at Balmoral, and as you say, last night for this, the final night that the Queen will spend in Buckingham Palace. And even that in itself is something to take in, isn't it? Because over the last 70 years, we have associated that building with her so much. It's a place that has been at the centre of British life for such a long time. And just watching the hearse, and we should say that's a specially designed hearse. The Queen was consulted on its design because she wanted, as she had throughout her life, for people to be able to see her. She always wore those bright colours. The hearse has been designed with the maximum windows, with the light inside it, that even as it was speeding through or driving through West London yesterday, you could still see the coffin very, very clearly, the royal standard placed upon it, and really poignant moments. And inside, what we can't see, members of the royal family, of course the new king, her children, her grandchildren, and I think very much no images of that, because they wanted that to be a final private time, because as of just after 2 o'clock today, when the coffin leaves here at Buckingham Palace, it will become once again a very public event. But for those final few hours, they have had time on their own with their mother, with their grandmother. We've been talking about the staff as well, who've spent so many years of their lives devoted to her service. They will have been able to pay tribute privately to her.
Sarah, thank you so much. And as you say, 2:20 this afternoon, she belongs to the nation again, doesn't she, when the hearse will move from Buckingham Palace. Well, John is in Westminster for us this morning, where Her Majesty's coffin will be taken this afternoon. John, so we see that part of London, don't we, so often on the programme, but what's happening there today is completely different from what we're used to.
That's right, these media tents go up when there's a state opening of Parliament or a budget. Here recently for the leadership contest that gave us the new Prime Minister. But I've never seen anything quite like this in terms of the security that's here. And just the mood is very different. It doesn't feel like normal politics. It feels like all that has been suspended. And I'm joined now on breakfast by the leader of His Majesty's opposition, Sir Keir Starmer. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us on breakfast. You were just telling me that you've been past some of those crowds on your way here.
Yes, as I came in this morning, just over the river, I saw the queue of people waiting to come in and pay their respects. Quite incredible to see people just coming together in that way, waiting for probably what will be many, many hours before they get the chance to come and pay their respects. But it's very human emotion, I think, where people just want to come, have that private moment where they say thank you to a remarkable sovereign and reflect on the history that we're really seeing in front of us.
Those pictures in Edinburgh over the last few days, across Scotland, and then last night in London as the hearse arrived from Northolt, just thousands and thousands of people.
I think it's been very moving across, the whole country, whether in Scotland or across the rest of the United Kingdom. The arrival of the hearse, but also I was really struck with the whole journey down to Edinburgh, with almost everybody who could come out of their home coming and lining the road in their village, in their town, wherever it may be. It's been quite an incredible moment where so many people have come together. I think that's there's different emotions here. There's one, people really wanting to just show respect and say thank you for a remarkable 70 years of public service. People wanted to come forward and, say to King Charles, we support you, encourage you as you go forward. And then I think the human instinct in times of change just to come together and be with one another. So all of that is going on, I think.
The coffin comes here to Westminster Hall and to lie in state later today, and you were saying that you'll be there in a professional capacity as a politician, but you also want to be here in a personal capacity too.
Yes, so today I'll be there as part of the reception committee to receive the coffin. We've got members of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, so I'll be there as leader of His Majesty's opposition. We need to get used to these new titles. And then later on this evening, in a private capacity, because my wife and our children, I've got a boy who's 14, a little girl who's 11, they want to come in, and as a family we will then pay our own personal respects to a remarkable sovereign.
And as a dad, as a family, what have you noticed about how the kids have responded to the last few days?
Well, it's quite incredible. As I say, boy 14, girl 11, so they know what's going on. They can feel the emotion of this. They can feel the uncertainty of what's going on. I think, like many families, there's an additional emotion going on, because anybody who's lost a mother or a grandmother will know what it must be like. I sadly lost my mother in 2015, just before 2 weeks before I got into the House of Commons. My wife lost her mother in the middle of the Labour leadership contest in difficult circumstances, and I think all of us are sort of reflecting on that as we think what the royal family are going through. And I had the great privilege on Saturday afternoon of meeting King Charles, and one of the things I said to him was, how on earth is he dealing with the private grief that always comes when you lose a mother, with the very public responsibility that he has, because almost everything he's doing is in the full glare of publicity. So I think a lot of families will be paying their respects, reflecting and thinking about their own family. And we've all had ups and downs, and at a moment like this we come together as a nation and I think reflect together.
How are you reflecting on the times you spent with Her Majesty in the past? Because you must have met her on several occasions.
Yes, she's a remarkable woman. I think everybody who's met her thinks that. Everybody who's met her will always break out in a smile when they describe any time they spent with her. It was fantastic from my point of view, but she touched so many lives, so many places she went to, communities she went to, and I've been really struck not just by my own experience of this, but how people have relayed that personal contact. And 70 years of public service is absolutely remarkable, and for most people, I think probably 90% I'd say of the population, she was the Queen, the only Queen, and I think above all else, our Queen.
You say 90%, we all know that while everybody sympathises with the family, some people will feel that the reaction has been a little over the top, especially at a time with the cost of living crisis and when lots of families are under real pressure. What do you say to people who maybe think this is too much?
I don't think it has been over the top. And when you see people queuing, as I have this morning, when you see people coming to the side of the road just to be close to the coffin as it passes, nobody's forcing anybody to do that. This is a human instinct, I think, to come forward at a moment like this. Of course, there's the parts that are, well organised, the choreography, etc. But mainly I've been struck with the fact that people have just wanted to come forward to say thank you.
Yeah, and to those small minority of people, but those people who've wanted to protest, and we've seen with blank signs because they feel that they don't have the right, or they're going to be arrested or challenged if they speak up or object. Have you been concerned about some of the police activity towards them?
The word I'd use around that issue is respect. I think, if people have spent a long time waiting to come forward, to have that moment as the coffin goes past or whatever it may be, I think respect that, because people have made a huge effort to come and have that private moment to say thank you to Queen Elizabeth II. Respect that. Obviously we have to respect the fact that some people disagree. One of the great British traditions is the ability to protest and to disagree, but I think if it can be done in the spirit of respect the fact that hundreds of thousands of people do want to come forward and have that moment, don't ruin it for them. But also we do need to respect the fact that other people must be entitled to express their different views.
And as you remember your meetings with the Queen, what's the one thing that will always stick with you about the chats you've had?
The twinkle in the eye and the incredible detail that she had. She was meeting so many people, but she remembered and knew one thing about you. That is an incredible thing, but the twinkle in the eye.
Sir Keir Starmer, thank you so much for joining us on BBC Breakfast this morning. Thanks for your time. Well, let's have a look at what's happening here in Westminster today, shall we? Because I know a lot of people watching this morning are keen to attend here, or just to be aware of what is going to be on television a bit later. So Her Majesty's coffin will arrive here at exactly 3 o'clock this afternoon, and the public will then be admitted to pay their respects, to file past that coffin from 5 p.m. today. And with hundreds of thousands of people expected to queue up to pay their respects, there is an extensive area that's been set up to manage the demand. The front of the queue is on the other side of the River Thames, on the south side, the Albert Embankment side as we call it, on the other side of Lambeth Bridge. And as more people join that queue over the next few days, it's going to stretch all the way along the south side of the Thames, going past Tate Modern and London Bridge before it winds its way to Southwark Park. And the government is warning that mourners could face a wait of up to 30 hours if it goes that far. There will be a wristband system in operation though, which will allow people to leave the queue if they need to go and get food or drink or to use the loo, and there is a separate accessible route for those with mobility issues, but people are being warned that they won't be able to sit down once the queue starts moving, so they've got to be prepared for a long wait standing up in the main queue. It could be quite a challenge for them. And it's been quite a challenge overnight because it's been pouring down with rain here. Some people already soaking wet even before the queue starts moving. Tim Muffet is with some of them on the other side of Lambeth Bridge, and we can join him now. Hi, Tim.
Yeah, morning, John. It's an archetypal British activity, isn't it? Queuing. This, though, will be a queue like no other. And strangers are meeting for the first time. Friendships are being forged. Many, many stories to be heard. Let's have a quick chat to Owen, Ewan and Alexandra. This was a spontaneous decision, wasn't it, for you to join the queue?
Yes, it was. Right now, I'm here on holiday from America, and this is such an important time in history. And so well in London, may as well be here because this is once in a lifetime.
Thanks very, very much indeed. Do you think that when you file past the Queen's coffin, what's going to be going through your mind?
So I'll be thinking about throughout the year, so hard work and dedication to everybody across this world, especially all over the Commonwealth, and just be thinking that queuing here is the least we can do to repay her for all she's done for us.
Thanks very much indeed for those thoughts. Now, Sabrina, you're from Belgium originally, aren't you? When you saw the footage of the Queen coffin arriving back in London yesterday, what went through your mind?
It just felt emotional, like it just put everything back into place, and it made you realise that it did actually happen, and she actually is no longer there, so it was emotional.
And this queue is it's extraordinary feeling, isn't it, here this morning?
Yeah, well, no one knows each other, we're all here on our own, and then there's this sense of everyone's here for the same reason, and it's like this community of people that want to be there and want to pay their respects.
Okay, thanks very much, Sabrina. Now, Stefan, you were born shortly after the coronation, weren't you?
Right.
You've always thought you've had a special connection with the Queen.
Yes, indeed, yes. I've always felt that her reign has, I've sort of been growing up with her. And as a children in particular, Prince now, King Charles, he's always meant a lot to me because he's, I rather like his ideas and the fact that the children kind of grew up about the same time as me. And I've always kind of respected the Queen very, very much for all that she's, brought to us as a nation, brought to our life and to me in particular because of that connection.
Sentiments shared by so many others here this morning. Thank you very much indeed, Stefan. Now, 5 o'clock, that's when the queue will start moving and people will be able to file past the coffin in Westminster Hall. The queue is getting bigger and bigger, and that's only going to continue as the day continues. Back to you, John.
Yeah, Tim, thank you very much indeed. And for those people who are joining the queue either today or over the next 4 days, we need to know what the weather's going to be like, don't we? And Matt has the forecast for us this morning. Hi, Matt.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, once again, a lot of dry weather around today for the vast majority. Southern areas, though, we start off with rain before things gradually brighten up. Let's concentrate on southern areas to begin with. Lots of cloudy around the English Channel. Some rumbles of thunder near the Channel Islands. Heaviest rain along the south coast towards the southeast. But notice how that fizzles out into the afternoon, and we'll see some sunnier conditions develop for most as we head into the end of the day. As for the rest of the UK, some dense patches of fog. Midlands, northern England gradually clearing. Same to north east Wales. More cloud around some of these western areas, especially for Northern Ireland, could produce the odd shower. A few showers in northern Scotland, quite a stiff breeze. Feeling rather cool here, but elsewhere, most places this afternoon will be dry with some sunshine around. Temperatures already dropping for the northern half of the UK. Not too bad in the south. Warm enough for the sunshine, 22 or 23 the high. This evening and overnight, though, it will be a much fresher night. Cloud down through eastern districts of England could produce the odd shower, stopping temperatures dropping here too much, but in the clearer conditions, the north and the west, well down into single figures in rural parts, maybe as low as around 2 or 3 degrees in parts of rural Scotland. So a chilly start to tomorrow, a lot of dry weather around, a lot of sunshine too. The cloudiest conditions probably down through some eastern parts of southern England, small chance of a shower, greater chance of a shower in northern parts of Scotland, a noticeable breeze, so out of the sunshine it will feel much cooler, and that cooling trend continues into Friday. That's how it's looking. Back to you.
Matt, thank you. Good morning. Let's take a look at some of the other news this morning. New figures from the Office for National Statistics have shown a slight fall in inflation last month. Ben is with us this morning and has all the details. Ben, what can you tell us?
Yes, this is something of a surprise. Of course, when we talk about inflation, we're talking about how much average prices have gone up compared with what they were a year ago. And we have just found out in the last 20 minutes or so that in August, that rate stood at 9.9%. Now, that means average prices are still going up, and quite steeply, but not as steeply as they were in July. But they're still near the highest level they've been at for 40 years. As always, that figure is an average. Some things will have gone up by more, some things will have gone up by less. And let me kind of explain that. Petrol and diesel prices actually fell between July and August, so that helped bring the overall rate down. But as I'm sure many people have noticed, food and non-alcoholic drinks prices went up, and that's keeping inflation at a level that's a lot higher than is considered ideal. Now, the cost of food has been one of the big drivers that's been pushing up inflation for a good number of months now. Grocery prices rising at their fastest since 2008. And as we were hearing yesterday, average wages are just not keeping up with prices. If prices are going up on average 9.9%, if your wages aren't keeping pace with that, it feels like things are getting more expensive and your money just isn't going as far. The government hopes that its plans to limit energy bill rises will stop inflation getting too much higher next year, but we'll have to wait and see what their plans are for businesses in particular. The other important point with inflation is that when it gets this high, the Bank of England tends to raise interest rates to try and keep it under control. The bank likes to see inflation at 2%. 9.9% is way above target. We've already seen interest rates go up to 1.75%. Most experts expect that interest rates will go up further. Of course, that makes mortgages more expensive. It makes credit card loans and borrowing more expensive as well.
And looking ahead to Monday, Ben, the Queen's funeral, which we know is going to be a bank holiday, it's being left up to businesses to decide whether or not they close.
Yes, and Center Parcs, actually in particular, has seen a backlash over its handling of that decision. Like many employers, it wanted to close for the day to give staff time to mark the Queen's funeral. They had said that guests already staying at one of their parks, any of their parks, would have to leave for 24 hours and come back, and new guests would have to delay their arrival. There's been an angry reaction to that. It's forced the resort to do a partial U-turn. They're now saying people who have already started their holiday, are already there, will be allowed to stay. Those who are due to arrive on Monday are still being asked to delay their arrival until Tuesday. It's worth mentioning a lot of big chains will be closed on Monday, including some major supermarkets, cinemas, leisure centres, so probably worth checking with yours.
OK, Ben, thanks very much for the update. Elsewhere this morning, Ukraine is continuing to recapture large swathes of territory in the Kharkiv region, but accusations of torture and brutality by Russian troops have been made in newly liberated areas. Our correspondent Hugo Bachega is in Kyiv. Hugo, good morning. What more can you tell us about these claims?
Well, John, as Ukraine recaptures territory in the northeast, we're starting to hear some dramatic accounts of what life was like under occupation. And these areas were invaded by Russian forces at the very beginning of the war. We've heard a story of a man who said he was tortured. He was taken away by Russian forces after they found a picture of his brother in uniform, and he said he was given electric shocks. There was a pensioner who said he didn't leave the basement. He and his family lived in fear because Russian forces were taking people from the streets to be tortured. So now Ukrainian officials returning to those villages say that they're finding evidence of alleged war crimes, and there is a long road ahead for those investigators. But the Ukrainians are saying that they're going ahead with this counteroffensive and that the goal is to retake all territory that's been invaded by Russia, including Crimea and eastern parts of the country that were invaded in 2014. It's not going to be easy, it's not going to be quick, because the Russians still occupy around a fifth of this country.
Hugo Bachega with the latest there in Kiev. Thank you. Some staff at Clarence House have been warned their jobs are at risk following King Charles's accession to the throne. A royal spokesperson said some redundancies were unavoidable because of the change in role for Charles and his Queen consort Camilla, who will now move to Buckingham Palace. The Guardian newspaper claims dozens of staff were told the news during the Thanksgiving service for the Queen in Edinburgh on Monday. English football resumed last night after the weekend's fixtures were postponed following the death of Her Majesty the Queen, with a full programme in the Football League. Both Liverpool and Tottenham played in the Champions League last night. There was a moment's silence at Anfield before kick-off against Ajax. The sides were lost silence too before Harry Kane and his Tottenham side faced Sporting Lisbon in... It's just gone 7:30. Time now to get the news, travel and weather where you are this morning.
Good morning. You're watching BBC Breakfast. I just want to bring you this beautiful shot that we have here this morning of the Mall at 7:35 as this city wakes up, actually, and prepares for the day ahead, a momentous day ahead. A day of several significant moments that we will be bringing you here on the programme. And of course, you'll know that the coffin of Her Majesty the Queen spent one night here last night, was brought from Edinburgh yesterday evening. Huge crowds were here to witness that moment in the dark last night. We're expecting even bigger crowds here today when Her Majesty is taken to lie in state at Westminster Hall. We're going to show you the route that procession will take. The coffin will leave Buckingham Palace here on a horse-drawn gun carriage at precisely 22 minutes past 2 this afternoon, and will then travel very slowly along the Mall, along Horse Guards Parade and down Whitehall. Now, the King and other members of the royal family will walk behind the carriage, and the procession will arrive at Westminster Hall at precisely 3 o'clock. Now, the hall's going to be open to the public from 5 o'clock, and we are expecting around 400,000 people to file past Her Majesty as she lies in state for 4 days. Well, we can talk now to Major General Christopher Ghika, who is at Wellington Barracks this morning. Major General Ghika, thank you for talking to us this morning. I know this is a day that you have been part of planning for a very, very long time.
And we will deliver the best state ceremonial that this city has ever seen. It's seen a lot, but I think that is the way in which we can do duty, a last duty to our Queen.
And what does it mean to the military personnel that will be taking part today and over the coming days?
I'm off, thanks.
I think we might have lost the line to Major General Christopher Ghika. Do apologise. We will try and come back to Major Ghika if we can in the next few minutes. But now our reporter Graham Satchell was here at Buckingham Palace last night when Her Majesty's coffin was brought back to her London home. Here's his report.
There were umbrellas everywhere at Buckingham Palace, the rain relentless. Definitely weather for wellies. This is Katie with her children Ava and Leo.
It's just such a monumental moment in history for me, my mum, and then for the next generation. And it's something we'll always cherish as a memory, and especially doing it all together. We've all got different stories, and it's just a really special moment.
For more than 5 days, crowds have been gathering here, the Queen's official residence, but it's felt strange knowing the palace is empty. So there was nervous anticipation at the Queen's imminent arrival.
The whole world's eyes are here today because of the kindness, of the love, of the unity, of everything that's good that's British is her. And coming here today when she's not actually here feels like a little bit empty, but having everyone around makes it a little bit easier to bear.
Shirley was here with her family.
What did the Queen mean to you?
Like if it's my mom, I cried today because being here, it's so emotional, honestly. It's a lifetime history.
I think it'd be emotional, you know. She's amazing, isn't she? So she was our Queen. We've travelled from Rotherham to look at it, so we got wet through. It's got to be worth it, hasn't it?
As day turned to night, the crowds moved into position and became quiet, ready to welcome the Queen home. There were brief moments of cheering, but near the gates it was silent. People straining every sinew to capture the moment.
It was very emotional, a bit choked. I didn't know what the protocol should be, whether you should cheer, whether you should... I don't know, I just didn't know really what to do.
Only after the Queen had passed through the gates was there a release and applause.
I felt more emotional than I thought I'd feel. Just immense sadness, and I was thinking about it as well in terms of like monarchy and is it just symbolism? But I think this today proves that it's not just symbolism. It brings people together. It's not political, so there's no major divide. Everyone's on the same page, and we look forward.
Everyone's really come together. You feel like you've sort of just had a sort of out-of-body experience all together. It's a real surreal moment, and yeah, one that won't be forgotten, that's for sure.
Seeing her actual coffin in person.
Isn't it moving? I just hold my feelings in words and bless her. May she find a rest in peace. God rest her soul.
For many here, seeing the Queen's coffin, a profoundly sad and solemn moment. Graham Satchell, BBC News at Buckingham Palace.
Well, just a moment ago, we started to talk to Major General Christopher Ghika. I do believe we have him back now, Commanding Officer of the Military Personnel, who we will see on display today. Major General Ghika, thank you so much for bearing with us after a little technical problem there. Just, I was asking you, wasn't I, about how long you have been preparing for this moment and what it's like to be in this moment now.
Well, we have a number of what we call contingent operations, possibilities which we keep plans for at all stages, all the time, and this is one of them. And now we're rolling it out. But I think for all of us, it's a really significant moment. It's a very sad moment, but it's a uniquely privileged opportunity for us to play a duty to our Queen.
What type of preparations have you been able to put in place? How much work goes into a series of events? Because it's not just one day, is it? It's a series of days. How much work goes into the week leading up to the funeral?
A lot. Each operation has to be planned. We have to give instructions to those who are taking part, to rehearse it and then to actually execute it. And as you say, there's something almost every day. And so to get that cycle running on an almost daily basis takes an immense amount of work from the servicemen and women involved.
We're just seeing pictures now of the rehearsal that happened overnight yesterday. I know that started around 3 o'clock yesterday morning. We just caught the end of it as we were arriving at work. Even the rehearsal was incredibly impressive just to be able to witness for a few moments. But for the men and women who are taking part, how important a moment is this for them? What will these days mean to them?
It's a sad duty, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-two-generation opportunity to be part of history, to be able to take part in the funeral arrangements of somebody whose example of duty and service is something we try to emulate. But above anything else, it's a last duty to our Queen. And for everybody, for all of us who are lucky enough to be here today to perform this sad duty, it is absolutely unique.
And I know in all of this we are talking about a hugely emotional event for many, many people, but I'm interested to know, what are the pressures of organising something on this scale for you?
Well, there's a significant amount of pressure to get it right, obviously, to do what the nation would expect, what the world, the Commonwealth would expect this country would do in tribute to the Queen. But that's not something that rests just with me. There are thousands of servicemen and women, not only in London but around London, who are working extremely hard to deliver it. And they, I'm sure, will deliver an outstanding performance this afternoon and throughout the rest of the week.
And I know you, of course, met the Queen. Will you have time, will there be time for you to pay your own personal respects? Will you have a moment?
That's a good question. I hope so. There's a danger, I think, for all of us involved that you get carried away on the day-on-day, hour-on-hour preparation when there's something going on every hour when it's so busy. But I've encouraged everybody to stop and just take a moment to reflect. I encourage people to do that on the afternoon that the death was announced, conscious that we may not get an opportunity to do it until after the funeral. For me personally, I suspect it will really sink in after the funeral, after that day, when I sit down and reflect on what has happened in the preceding 11 days.
And in the many years of military service that you have in your own career, what are your personal memories of the Queen?
She was extremely charming, extremely interested. She had a wonderful sense of humour, but she was extremely well prepared. And when you went to see her, to brief her on what the household division would be doing, she would know the fine detail, and she would ask you about it. So it really was an audience with somebody who was extremely well prepared, but she was well prepared because she was interested. And that, I think, is something that everybody in the armed forces felt quite deeply, that she really took an interest in what we were doing.
Major General Christopher Ghika, we wish you well for the coming days. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Sally.
It is 7:46 exactly. Let's go over to John, who is in Westminster this morning. So, John, as we've been telling everybody, a really emotional and historic day lies ahead of us now.
That's right, Sally. At 2:22 precisely, the Queen's coffin will leave Buckingham Palace, where you are, and be brought on foot in procession, accompanied by members of the royal family, down here to Westminster, to the Palace of Westminster, where she will then lie in state for 4 days in Westminster Hall. And our chief political correspondent, Nick Eardley, is here and can talk us through what's going to happen. And Nick, we're used to seeing the Queen in the House of Lords for the state opening of Parliament. We think about the House of Commons so much in this building too, but it's Westminster Hall that will be the focus of this. Just explain the geography of where we're talking about.
It's an amazing building, Westminster Hall. It's right in the middle of Parliament. It's the oldest part of the estate. It's almost a millennium old. And you know, you're right, John. Normally we'd expect the Queen at the state opening to pull up just behind where we are just now, to go in that part of the palace there and to give that Queen's speech. It's amazing to think that she only missed 3 of them over the past 70 years. But yes, you know, today's going to feel very different. It'll be around 3 o'clock. There's a short service in Westminster Hall bringing the coffin in. Then around 5 o'clock this evening, members of the public will start to arrive at Westminster Hall to pay their own respects. This has happened a lot over the years. Westminster Hall is the place where those very public grievances take place. Over the past kind of few years, we had the Queen Mother in 2002. I think about 200,000 people came through Westminster Hall on that day. Winston Churchill as well. It's not just monarchs. Significant people in the British state over the decades have lain in state in Westminster Hall as well. When it was Winston Churchill in 1965, 1 million people came through Westminster Hall. So there's a lot of history taking place today, a lot of history taking place over the years in that building, and today we will start to see that as well with these 4.5 days of public mourning.
And we're saying thousands of people already waiting. They've spent the night in the pouring rain to be among the first mourners to be able to go and file past the coffin. A huge logistical security operation in place around this palace.
Yeah, I mean, they've been planning for it for years. There's always been a plan to get people through that building and allow people to pay their respects. The government think that the queue that could form just over the road, over the Thames from where we are just now, could be as long as 30 hours at some point. So the message from ministers this morning is keep having a look at the government website. We'll have it on the BBC as well, the latest updates about how long that's likely to be. It won't be 30 hours at all points, of course, and there are some special dispensations for people who won't be able to wait that long. All of that's online. But I think we are going to see quite a remarkable few days here, with potentially hundreds of thousands of people coming here to Parliament. A very different Parliament playing a very different role to what we normally see, to pay their respects.
Nick, for now, thank you very much indeed. A very familiar way here in Westminster in some ways. All the kind of things that you associate with those big occasions like the budget and the state opening of Parliament are here. The media village, the security, the barriers, the military. And yet it also feels very, very different. All the politics has kind of disappeared for a while and it's just replaced by ceremony. We can speak now on Breakfast to someone who not only met Her Majesty but did so in very special circumstances on centre court in Wimbledon with millions of people watching around the world. We are of course talking about Virginia Wade, who was awarded her winner's trophy by the Queen in 1977, and delighted that Virginia joins us now live from New York. Thank you very much indeed for staying up to talk to us, because I know it's the middle of the night there, Virginia. What are you thinking, watching this footage, these pictures, that the overwhelming response on the streets of London last night? What's going through your mind?
Well, first of all, I'm so honoured to be on today. I mean, I have been absolutely glued to the BBC here. I mean, 24 hours a day for the past week almost. And it is just, you know, copious tears, but incredible historical stories and the stories from every person who's ever met her, because anybody who ever met her will always remember that day. And I just reiterate what everybody says, what a wonderful person, the aura that she had. And for me personally, you know, at the end of my career, you know, I'd won a couple of Grand Slams before, and yet I hadn't ever performed really as well as I could at Wimbledon. And so I'm thinking, boy, what am I doing? And then I found out exactly about a day after I put in my entry form for Wimbledon that the Queen was going to be there. So I said, if the Queen's going to be there, because she hasn't been there for 15 years at least, and she hardly ever comes, I'm going to be there. And if I'm there, I better win. So, you know, I just sort of followed through with that plan. And I did say to her one time later on, I said, I have to thank you, Your Majesty. You really helped me. So, but, you know, she was amazing. I mean, she knew about the best time I think I had was at Wimbledon with her, when she was there again in 2010. And we sat at this very small table having lunch with 8 people, including Roger Federer on her right and the other 2 previous English Wimbledon champions. And Roger Federer was just engrossed with everything she said. And I was engrossed with everything. And it was a highly diverse conversation. She was on her way to speak at the UN in New York, and so she said, I haven't been there since so long, and you know, I'm not quite sure yet what I'm going to say, but she was on the ball about everything.
Wow. Let's take you back to 1977 then, your Wimbledon win with that motivating monarch cheering you on. It was a huge time for the Queen as well, because it was during the Silver Jubilee celebrations, wasn't it? So for you and for her, such a special moment.
It ended up, I mean, in retrospect, you know, it was a fairy tale come true, because there it was the centenary of Wimbledon, 100 years. It had been, 9 years, I think, since Bridget Person had won. Here, England was struggling a little bit then in a lot of departments. And then the celebrations that were going on for her Jubilee were immense, everywhere, street parties and all the rest of it. And there she came to Wimbledon. So the confluence of these incredible moments was just awesome. And, you know, I just can't believe, you know, the more time goes by, I can't believe that it was me who was there and the Queen and all that very special, unique situation. And I think it lifted a lot of people too. So that was great.
It certainly did, and it was definitely you. I can assure you, we've got the pictures. It was definitely you. What did she say to you when she presented you with the trophy? I know you get a brief moment in front of the crowds. What was that conversation between the two of you?
Well, that's the funniest thing of all. You know, there was so much commotion in the crowd, and they were all singing because she's a jolly good fellow, and clapping and applauding and cheering, and I really couldn't hear her. So I after I'd said, excuse me once, I couldn't really say it more than once. I didn't hear you, so I just read her lips, and I know she said congratulations and well done, and it was a great day, and all the things like that, very simple. And then the amazing thing was she took a step back to let me hold up that amazing trophy. So but the royal family has just made Wimbledon that extra special place, and that's what they do to everywhere they go. I mean, we are so fortunate to have the royal family, and it's so coverage has been compulsory watching. I mean, it's just extraordinary, and her life was extraordinary, and all those you can't have words to express all the infinite qualities that she had.
That's funny, Virginia, that she stepped out of the way of your photograph. Not many people can say that.
So that was like very, very touching. I mean, embarrassing, really. I mean, you know, I was only half there. I mean, I knew that my picture would be in the papers the next day. That was about how real it was for me.
Seeing these pictures that you mentioned from London, the crowd sleeping out on the banks of the Thames to far past the coffin, do you wish you were here in the UK right now?
Absolutely, no question at all. I don't know that I would be standing in the rain though for 36 hours. I mean, my time has passed for doing something like that. But I mean, I would be find a way.
It does feel like a very British weather at the moment. We've had pouring rain, we've had people in tents. It's a bit like those people who queue outside Wimbledon.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, they've had practice. Yeah, but I mean, nobody does it like the British do. And, you know, I'm just so happy for King Charles as well. It's going to be awesome. So,
lovely words and
watching.
Lovely memories. Thank you so much for joining us on BBC Breakfast this morning. Virginia Wade live in New York with her reflections and her memories and her lovely stories about meeting the Queen back in 1977. Thank you very much indeed, Virginia. I mentioned the rain that the crowds here have already been putting up with. Matt can tell us how it's going to affect London in the next few days and the rest of the UK as well. Good morning, Matt.
Thank you. Good morning. Another dry and reasonably sunny day for the vast majority today, but different story across southern areas. We start with cloud and outbreaks of rain this morning before things brighten up. Cloud there on the satellite imagery at the moment, but at long last it's starting to take a shift southwards and eastwards. That said, if we concentrate on southern areas to begin with, outbreaks of rain, particularly around English Channel coast in the southeast, some heavy bursts around, rumbles of thunder close to the Channel Islands, but notice how most of that will fade away through the day. Sunnier conditions will develop from the north. As for the rest of the country today, a few mist and fog patches around across the Midlands, northern England especially. They will clear by mid-morning. A bit more cloud around some of these western areas, particularly Northern Ireland, Irish Sea coast. The odd shower here. A few showers in northern Scotland too, but many places will be dry with some sunshine this afternoon, but feeling a bit cooler than recent days with the breeze picking up in the north, whereas further south we'll see temperatures actually a bit higher than yesterday. More sunshine, 22 or 23. Into this evening and overnight, areas of cloud running down through eastern counties of England could just bring the odd shower. More showers in northern Scotland, but with clearer conditions developing for many, it's going to be an even fresher night than we've had so far. Temperatures could get as low as 3 or 4 degrees in some parts of Scotland, still staying in double figures further south. And then beyond that, well, let's start with a look at London. A lot of eyes on the capital over the next few days. Dry weather, just a small chance of a shower, but temperatures dropping by day and by night. These are nighttime temperatures compared to how we started this week. By the time we hit the weekend, some rather chilly starts with temperatures in single figures. And that cooler air is coming in from the north for all of us as we go through the next few days. The chance of a few showers comes through little areas of cloud running down through the eastern coast and along the North Sea. We could see a bit more cloud, in fact, through East Anglia south east tomorrow. Only a small chance of a shower here. Greater chance of a shower in northern parts of Scotland. Isolated ones in the west. Most of you tomorrow, though, having a dry day. Sunshine around, but already temperatures starting to drop. Pleasant enough in the sunshine, but it's out of it. You'll probably notice it more than anything else. Only 11 to 13 degrees in northern Scotland, 18 or 19 in the south. Cooler still into Friday. Greater chance of some heavier showers running down eastern counties of England. Again, very close to London, mainly though towards the east of London itself. Further north and west, most places will be dry, but we will see those temperatures continue to drop way down what we normally expect for this stage in September. Feeling cool as well this weekend in the cloudier moments. Isolated showers. Most places, though, will be dry.
Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with me, Sally Nugent, at Buckingham Palace, where the Queen's coffin has spent the night, and John Kay in Westminster. Our headlines this morning. Queen Elizabeth II will make her final journey from Buckingham Palace this afternoon. Crowds braved the rain to greet the coffin as it arrived from Edinburgh last night.
Hello. Yes, the procession will make the short journey up the Mall to here at the Palace of Westminster, where the Queen will then lie in state until the morning of her funeral. And hundreds of thousands of people are expected to pay their respects over the next 4 days, and queues have already begun to form.
In other news this morning, the spiralling cost of living continues, but the latest inflation figures show prices aren't rising quite as fast.
Good morning, it's Wednesday, September the 14th. You're watching BBC Breakfast from outside Buckingham Palace, where Her Majesty the Queen laid at rest overnight. This afternoon, starting at precisely 2:22, her coffin will be moved from here to Westminster Hall, about a mile away, where she will lie in state. And an estimated 400,000 people will file past to pay their respects before her funeral on Monday. Today on Breakfast, we will bring you the latest news and images from here at the Palace, from Westminster, and from the growing queue, and we will hear more memories from those who met and knew the Queen. First, our reporter Dan Johnson on Her Majesty's final journey to London from Scotland.
A cheering crowd in the capital city. This has been the focus of much of the nation's grief. And it is Buckingham Palace, more than anywhere, which is so closely associated with the Queen. For so long, her place of work and her official home. Her coffin arrived at 8 o'clock last night, ending the journey from Scotland. In pouring rain, on a dark night, people were determined to give her a welcome.
Felt we had to just come and pay our respects. We was lucky enough to see the hearse pass us, and we've just seen King Charles leave the palace.
Really nice that the flag's flying for her to be back home.
Like she's home, yeah.
Yeah, really nice.
The Queen's coffin is resting here overnight and will then be taken to the Palace of Westminster later today. This is really a last chance for the royal family to be together in private, to share a personal moment with the Queen's coffin before the public lying in state ahead of her funeral on Monday. This was the last leg of the long journey that began at Balmoral. A guard of honour from the Queen's Colour Squadron, silent and solemn in greeting at RAF Northolt. Princess Anne said she'd been fortunate to share her mother's last 24 hours, and it had been an honour and a privilege to witness the love and respect along these final journeys. So then, the drive to the centre of the capital. This was the A40. The cars stopped, the people stood. A column of flashing lights illuminated a gloomy evening. The official state hearse was specially designed in consultation with Her Majesty to give the public the clearest view through fading light. For mile after mile, through underpasses and across flyovers, this was the journey back to the city where the Queen was born, where she was crowned, where she reigned over the kingdom and the Commonwealth. And the closer they drew to her official residence, the heavier the rain, but the bigger the crowds. Down Park Lane and past Hyde Park Corner to the place the Queen knew best. Buckingham Palace was familiar before being Queen was even her destiny. As a girl, she played here, and as a mother, it's where she raised her family. It was not, though, where she felt most at home. She regarded it as living above the shop, for this is where she dedicated herself to the business of state. Papers read, banquets hosted, addresses given, the garden parties, the Christmas messages, and the Jubilee celebrations. When she waved and then turned from the palace balcony this summer, many felt her reign was nearing its end. And last night, her coffin was placed in the Bow Room, where the new king met High Commissioners and government ministers over the weekend. Then this afternoon, the procession will leave Buckingham Palace at 2:22. The Queen's coffin carried on a gun carriage of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. Crowds will watch as the cortege makes its journey through central London, along the Mall to Horse Guards, then down Whitehall to Parliament Square and into New Palace Yard, ready for the lying in state in Westminster Hall. Members of the public will be able to see the Queen's coffin guarded by soldiers from 5 p.m. until 6:30 on the morning of her funeral. And this is the route along which people will queue, from Southwark Park, along the Thames, up the South Bank and across Lambeth Bridge.
We are expecting extremely large queues that could go up to 30 hours. And it won't be 30 hours for everybody, but I think it's important that before people set off that they know just how long it could take, potentially. So we are supporting people throughout the queue, working with a number of partners like the Samaritans, like the Red Cross, also having stewards there as well, and working with the Metropolitan Police. So there'll be over 1,000 people per day who will be on hand to support people, to offer them advice, guidance.
And despite the weather, some were prepared to stay out all night.
It's sad. It's been very sad. Very, very sad, isn't it? Really sad. But so pleased we came. And we're going to stay tonight and watch tomorrow.
There's determination here to show gratitude, respect and support for the royal family as their private grief gives way to the public demands of national mourning and the rituals of the highest of state occasions conducted in the name of the people. Dan Johnson, BBC News at Buckingham Palace.
So those are the scenes overnight. Let's take you to the Mall now, just not very far from where I'm standing here. This is Buckingham Palace. You can see this morning just after 8 o'clock. There's a real sense of people preparing, getting ready for what will be a momentous day here. And we have another shot to show you, one we haven't been able to show you before, facing the other way. So this is from our camera on top of Buckingham Palace. You can see there the Queen Victoria Memorial, which was unveiled in 1911. Beautiful gold memorial there, right in the centre of the scene. As everybody's waking up to what will be a very important day for people living in London, people working at the palace. And we do have to remember, don't we, that Buckingham Palace, we think of it as perhaps the place the Queen lived and stayed. Also, it was the office, as we heard in Dan Johnson's report just then. The Queen said it was a bit like living above the shop. Well, someone who knows very much like what it was like working in that shop is Charles Anson, who is the Queen's press secretary from 1990 to 1997, a period which included some of her most difficult years. Morning, Charles.
Good morning.
That was a turbulent time, wasn't it?
It was a turbulent time. The Queen had been on the throne for over 40 years, which is longer than most people are doing one job. And that period in the 1990s was difficult, both in family terms and also, I think, background of a recession and a very small majority of the government. So a difficult time, but a sovereign on the throne with a great deal of experience. And I never once saw her falter during that 1992 period. She just kept going. That was her way.
Just remind us of 1992, because as a human being, she was under enormous pressure, wasn't she?
Queen was under enormous pressure, but actually that's something that she accepted as part of the role of being head of state and as monarch and head of the Commonwealth. There'd be good times and there'd be difficult times, and she faced both with the same equanimity. And I didn't once see her during that difficult year look despondent in any way. It was always a question of keep going and do your best was the feeling. And of course she always did her best.
Tell me about the challenges she faced during that time. I know, of course, we had the fire at Windsor Castle.
Yes, there was quite a lot of family problems with the marriages of some of her children.
The divorces.
That's right, the divorces. And of course, the very powerful media, especially tabloid media, huge interest in the private lives of the royal family, which is always difficult. But within that, a lot of focus on her role as head of state and head of the nation, going about her business. And she didn't falter once during that period, even I think during the fire at Windsor, where, in Windsor, which was really very much more her home, Buckingham Palace is much more, where the monarch works rather than lives. So I think, you know, to lose your home in those circumstances, you'd expect it to be demoralising. But I remember the Queen coming back on that night of the fire to Buckingham Palace, because she couldn't stay in her apartments at Windsor, and came through the door, and we offered our sympathies, and she said, well, broke into a huge smile and said, well, at least we saved some of the pictures. So even in a time of adversity, she looked for that moment of hope, and I think that's a bit of the sort of wartime spirit during peacetime.
You mentioned the tabloid press, because in those years, of course, the tabloid press was hugely powerful. How did that work, going into your office here at Buckingham Palace every day? We've just had a look, haven't we, the window of the office that you worked in is not too far from where we're standing now.
That's right.
Every morning, would you be braced for the newspapers to arrive, and how would you then relay the news to the Queen, or would the papers be on the breakfast table?
The papers would be on the breakfast table, and the Queen, you know, as a boss, took it all in her stride. She'd been working as the monarch for 40 years, and the media was part of the sort of democratic landscape. The free press was there, and of course reporting on a lot of what the monarchy is doing. So the perception of monarchy and the media's role is a good one. It's not always a negative one, it's often a very positive one. And it's difficult, of course, when it becomes a focus on your own family, that you can't deal with your difficulties in private. It's much more difficult for the royal family. But for the Queen, it was a question of simply, you know, keeping going. She made that vow when she was crowned, that whether my life be short or long, I devote it to the service of my people. And she's stuck to that simple formula through 70 years, never faltered. And I never once in 7 years working for her felt her to be despondent, and that was a huge encouragement. You'd go up to see the Queen about a particular problem, whether it was family or whether it was a work question, but you always came out feeling, right, I know what I've got to do, and I know that I'm going to be supported however difficult the circumstances were.
And during those years, as her press secretary, how different was the image of the Queen that we saw portrayed on television and in those tabloid papers from the image of your boss that you have?
Well, I think when the Queen first came to the throne, it was still a very formal post-war society. And gradually it changes, and of course the Queen and Prince Philip were great devotees of the walkabout, because it enabled them to talk to people within the crowd without it being necessarily arranged. So that sort of opening up of the monarchy happened in the 70s and 80s, and of course with social media that's opened it a lot more. And I think, for example, the Queen's contribution to steadying people's morale during COVID, her messages that we're going to get through this, we're going to meet again, we're going to see our families again, was extremely reassuring, not only to the British people and to the Commonwealth, but actually to people in villages in China and Russia and so on, who from a distance admired this very stalwart, steady figure at the centre of public life, much respected throughout the world, not just in this country and the Commonwealth, but really throughout the world, the most experienced head of state that there's been for many, many decades.
And do you have a favourite moment that you might be able to share with us this morning from those years of working so closely with the Queen?
I think probably my favourite moment was the moment when the Queen made her first state visit to South Africa, having not been there since 1947, and stepping down the gangplank and being greeted by President Mandela saying, "Welcome to South Africa, Your Majesty." And that was such a moment of relief from apartheid for South Africa, and in terms of the Queen's role as head of the Commonwealth, the opening up of a much more diverse society, which she really devoted a lot of her life to making a more diverse and better society for people living in the 21st century.
Charles Anson, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning. Thank you. It is 8:15. John's in Westminster this morning, where Her Majesty's coffin will be taken this afternoon. Now, John, you're in that familiar part of Westminster, but it's going to be a very, very different day today, isn't it?
Yes, Ali, I was just
thinking about different days, watching those pictures of you at Buckingham Palace as well, it's hard to believe, isn't it? It's 3 months ago. We were there outside the palace, the Queen herself on the balcony, the crowds below in the sunshine, cheering and smiling. And today we have pouring rain and the people along the Mall and outside the palace and all along the river now waiting to file past the coffin in such a different mood. Yes, the coffin will leave Buckingham Palace at 2:22 precisely. It's all plotted to the nearest second. And it will be brought here to Westminster Hall on the dot of 3 o'clock this afternoon. And we're expecting similar scenes as it leaves Buckingham Palace this afternoon to what we saw in Edinburgh over the last few days. And our reporter Charlotte Gallagher is on the Mall outside the palace talking to some of the people who are waiting to witness this moment. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, and just can you see how many people are here now? When I got here at 5 o'clock this morning, there was probably a few hundred people. Some very brave people, in fact, had camped out overnight in the cold and the wet, some tents, some people even just sitting in chairs. Let's speak to some of the people that have come down. Uncle Mick, you're not my uncle, but that is your name.
Yes.
And you go to a lot of the royal events, don't you?
Yes, I was here for the Platinum Jubilee and any event in the Mall, yes.
And usually you wear very colourful clothing, Union flag clothing, but you're wearing something different today.
Absolutely. As a mark of respect, I'm in top hat and tails, but I have got my Union Jack shoes on.
And your bag.
And I've got my marmalade sandwiches ready.
And we have confirmed that you are not going to leave them in the park.
No, I'm hoping to go to Westminster Hall later, so I will be here for about 30 hours.
Wow, that's a lot of commitment. Let's speak to some other people. Lots of people come down here from right across the world. Rosaria and Justin, you're from New York, aren't you?
Yes.
And you got the first flight you could when you heard the Queen had died.
Yes, we did. 10 o'clock Sunday night. Justin had work, so we took a late flight out of John F. Kennedy Airport to be here, to be part of this respect and celebration of life.
Yes, it's a very historic occasion, so we wanted to be here to pay our respects to the Queen, who, as Americans, we think that she's just synonymous with and symbolic of the entire United Kingdom.
And New York, parts of it lit up for the Queen, didn't it?
Absolutely. The Empire State Building was lit up for Queen Elizabeth II after her passing.
And there's always been this special relationship between the UK and the US. And one thing that I love is when presidents came to meet the Queen, the most powerful man in the world, they'd still stand a little bit straighter, be on their best behaviour because it was the Queen.
Absolutely, and our President Biden will be here Monday out of respect. I agree with you, everyone did stand a little taller.
You would, wouldn't you? She was the Queen, the most...
She was famous woman in the world. And as I said, the closest to royalty that we'll ever have, other than when we had John F. Kennedy and Jackie, was our royalty. So we've adopted your Queen and your monarch.
Thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
speaking to
Thank
us.
you.
Lots of people from right across the world. We met people from Mexico, Brazil, France this morning. And one thing that I really liked, one lady from France said, she was your Queen, but she was the world's Queen, John.
Yeah, it was interesting hearing that. And fascinating that some of those people prepared to stay there until Monday, Charlotte. And it's only, what, Wednesday morning now?
I know, I can't quite believe it. Some of the people have been out on the streets essentially since last Thursday. They've nipped home to get showers, get changed, but people have been staying out all night. Some of the people that were in chairs overnight here on the Mall, John, they said they nipped to the toilets to dry their hands under the hand dryer because it was so cold in the middle of the night, but they've been so committed to staying here. One man from Brazil, he said he's staying now until Monday. He's been here for 2 weeks now. He's extended his holiday just so he can witness these historic events. I have to say, I think the atmosphere is going to really change when the Queen leaves Buckingham Palace later on today, become a lot more sombre as we say goodbye to her. And I think, you know, looking at Buckingham Palace behind me, that balcony, that famous balcony she stepped out on so many times. I imagine that when the King steps out on there for the first time with the royal family, it might feel a little strange that the Queen is no longer with us.
Yeah, indeed. Charlotte, for now, thank you very much indeed. And thanks to all your guests for chatting to us when they're soaking wet, a lot of them. I suspect those people on the Mall know exactly what is going to happen over the next day or so. But if you're watching at home and you're wondering whether you might come to London to see this, to take part of it, let's just talk you through the sequence of events. So Her Majesty's coffin will arrive here at the Palace of Westminster at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and the public will be allowed into Westminster Hall from 5 o'clock to file past the coffin. Now, we're expecting hundreds of thousands of people to attend, many of them queuing up to pay their respects. There is an extensive area that's been set aside to manage the demand, and the front of that queue is on the other side of the River Thames, on the embankment side, Albert side, the south side of Lambeth Bridge. And then as more people join over the next 4 days, that line is expected to stretch all the way along the Thames, going past Tate Modern and London Bridge before it winds its way to Southwark Park. And the government's warning that mourners could face a wait of up to 30 hours if the queue gets that long. Now, there will be a wristband system in operation, which means that people will be allowed to leave the queue to get food or use the loo if they need to, or dry out under those hairdryers, as Charlotte was saying. Some people needed to overnight. And there is a separate accessible route as well for anybody with mobility difficulties. They won't have to do the whole route, they'll have a shorter route to deal with. The weather is going to be crucial for those people waiting over the next 4 days, isn't it? Matt has the forecast for us on Breakfast this morning. Hi, Matt.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, once again, a lot of dry weather around today for the vast majority. Southern areas, though, we start off with rain before things gradually brighten up. Let's concentrate on southern areas to begin with. Lots of cloudy around the English Channel. Some rumbles of thunder near the Channel Islands. Heaviest rain along the south coast towards the southeast. But notice how that fizzles out into the afternoon, and we'll see some sunnier conditions develop for most as we head into the end of the day. As for the rest of the UK, some dense patches of fog. Midlands, northern England gradually clearing. Same too in northeast Wales. More cloud around some of these western areas, especially for Northern Ireland, could produce the odd shower. A few showers in northern Scotland, quite a stiff breeze. Feeling rather cool here, but elsewhere, most places this afternoon will be dry with some sunshine around. Temperatures already dropping for the northern half of the UK. Not too bad in the south. Warm enough in the sunshine, 22 or 23 the high. This evening and overnight, though, it will be a much fresher night. Cloud down through eastern districts of England could produce the odd shower, stopping temperatures dropping here too much. But in the clearer conditions, the north and the west, well down into single figures in rural parts, maybe as low as around 2 or 3 degrees in parts of rural Scotland. So a chilly start to tomorrow. A lot of dry weather around, a lot of sunshine too. The cloudiest conditions probably down through some eastern parts of southern England. Small chance of a shower. Greater chance of a shower in northern parts of Scotland. A noticeable breeze. So out of the sunshine, it will feel much cooler, and that cooling trend continues into Friday. That's how it's looking. Back to you.
Matt, thank you. Good morning. In other news this morning, new figures from the Office for National Statistics have shown a slight fall in inflation last month. Ben is with us this morning and has all the details. Ben, what can you tell us?
Well, this is something of a surprise, really, John. When we talk about inflation, we are talking about how much average prices for the things we buy have changed, how much they've gone up compared with what they were a year ago. And we've just found out this morning that in August, that rate stood at 9.9%. Now, that means average prices are still going up, and going up quite steeply, but not quite as fast as they were in July. It's still near the highest level it's been for almost 40 years. As always, though, that figure is an average. Some things will have gone up by even more. Some things will have gone up by less. Let me explain the detail of that. Petrol and diesel prices actually fell between July and August, so that has helped keep the overall rate down. It's helped bring it down a bit. But I'm sure people have noticed food and non-alcoholic drinks prices went up even more steeply, actually, in August, keeping inflation at a level that is higher than is considered ideal. Grocery prices are rising at their fastest rate since 2008, according to market analysts Kantar. Now, that is one of the biggest drivers that's been pushing up inflation in recent months. We heard yesterday that average wages are not keeping up with average price increases. And when you factor in inflation, wages in real terms were down 2.8% in the year to July. Of course, if prices or inflation go up, but your wages don't, your money isn't going as far because things are getting more expensive. And that's what we mean when we talk about the cost of living squeeze and the pressure on household budgets. Some people may have had wage rises, but certainly not everyone. The government is hoping that its plans to limit and cap energy bills will stop inflation getting too much higher next year. The other thing that's important when we talk about inflation, the Bank of England tends to raise interest rates when inflation gets too high. The bank likes to see inflation at around 2%. 9.9% is way, way above that. The main interest rate went up in August to 1.75%. That makes loans more expensive, mortgages more expensive, credit cards more expensive, and we're expecting interest rates to go up even further. The bank has delayed its latest interest rate setting decision. It was meant to be this week, of course, because out of respect for the period of national mourning and the Queen's funeral, that has been delayed to the middle of next week. So we'll find out the latest decision on interest rates then.
And looking ahead to the funeral next week, we know it's going to be a bank holiday, but it's being left up to businesses to decide whether or not they close.
Yes, and the difficult thing is how they handle that. Center Parcs learnt that the hard way. It's had a backlash over its handling of the decision. Like many employers, it wanted to close, give its staff a chance to have the day to mark the Queen's funeral. Center Parcs had said that guests already staying would have to leave for 24 hours and then come back to resume their holiday. New guests would have to delay their arrival until Tuesday. There was a really angry reaction to that. It's forced the holiday resort firm to do a partial U-turn. They're now saying people who've already started their holiday can stay on, but they are still saying people who are due to arrive on Monday, delay it by 24 hours, arrive on Tuesday instead. It is worth mentioning at this point, John, a lot of big chains will be closed on Monday. Major supermarkets, some cinemas, leisure centres. So it is probably worth checking with yours what the arrangements are.
OK, Ben, thanks for that. Ukraine is continuing to recapture large swathes of territory in the Kharkiv region, but accusations of torture and brutality by Russian troops have been made in newly liberated areas. Our correspondent Hugo Bechega is in Kyiv. Morning, Hugo. What more can you tell us about these claims then?
Morning, John. So as Ukrainian forces are now recapturing those villages and towns, we're hearing some dramatic accounts of what life was like under Russian occupation. We've heard from a man who said he was taken away from his house by Russian forces after they found a picture of his brother in uniform. He said he was given electric shocks because of that. There was a pensioner who said he didn't leave his basement because he and his family lived in fear because Russian forces were taking people from the streets to be tortured. So dramatic accounts emerging from those villages, and now as Ukrainian authorities return to those places, they're now investigating those claims. But the Ukrainian authorities are saying that this counteroffensive continues, and they say that the goal is to retake all territory that's been under Russian occupation, including territory that was invaded in 2014, Crimea and also areas of the Donbas region in the east of the country. President Zelensky, again, talking about the need for more Western aid. I think those gains will be used by authorities here to tell Western partners that the Ukrainians can go ahead with this counteroffensive, can retake territory, but they need help, they need weapons from Western countries. It is not going to be easy. Around a fifth of this country remains under occupation, a huge challenge for the Ukrainians, but they feel they've got the momentum.
Hugo Bechega live in Kyiv this morning. Thanks for that. Some staff at Clarence House have been warned their jobs are at risk following King Charles's accession to the throne. A royal spokesperson said some redundancies were unavoidable because of the change in role for Charles and his Queen consort Camilla, who will now move to Buckingham Palace. The Guardian newspaper claims dozens of staff were told the news during the Thanksgiving service for the Queen in Edinburgh on Monday. The boss of Transport for London, which runs buses, tubes and some trains in the capital, has said the coming days will be the organisation's biggest ever challenge. The TfL Commissioner, Andy Byford, said the network had coped with enormous pressure in the past, like the London Olympics, but that it is much harder to predict the size and movement of crowds of royal mourners. Passengers are being asked to leave extra time and to be patient. English football resumed last night after the weekend's fixtures were postponed, following silence too before Harry Kane and his Tottenham side faced Sporting Lisbon in Portugal. There was late drama here on Breakfast. Time now to get the news, travel and weather where you are.
Good morning. You are watching BBC Breakfast. You can see scenes this morning live from the end of the Mall facing towards Buckingham Palace, which as the last couple of hours have ticked along has become even more a scene of activity. Crowds starting to fill here, people waiting behind the barricades, just a little distance away from the palace gates. And of course, this is where Her Majesty the Queen has just spent her final night here at Buckingham Palace. The coffin was brought from Edinburgh yesterday evening. If we take you now live to the shot we have from the roof of Buckingham Palace, this is not an image we would normally see, not often anyway. That's the Victoria Memorial. You just get a little bit of a sense there of where the crowds will start to build as we prepare for the procession, which is due to happen at 2:22 this afternoon. Expecting even bigger crowds today when Her Majesty is taken from this place, from Buckingham Palace, a place so associated with her, that balcony. We've seen her there so many times over the decades. She will leave here and will be taken in procession to lie in state at Westminster Hall. And I'm going to show you the route that she will take right now. The coffin is going to leave the palace on a horse-drawn gun carriage at 22 minutes past 2 this afternoon precisely. They will travel very slowly along the Mall, across Horse Guards Parade and down Whitehall. The King and other members of the royal family will walk behind the carriage and the procession will arrive at Westminster Hall at 3 o'clock. Now the hall will be open to the public from 5 o'clock this afternoon. We are expecting around 400,000 people to file past Her Majesty as she lies in state for the next 4 days and nights. Access 24 hours a day to Westminster Hall. And a full rehearsal for the procession of the Queen's coffin took place in the early hours of yesterday. We in fact saw the end of it here. It was incredible to witness, with hundreds of servicemen and women taking part. Our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale is at Wellington Barracks, which is just the other side of St James's Park from where I'm standing now. And Jonathan, we know those troops will be aiming for nothing less than perfection today.
And that's absolutely right. As you say, rehearsing in the early hours of yesterday morning for that procession. We're in the car park of Wellington Barracks at the moment, which, as you can see, has been turned into a makeshift stable for the horses of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, which will be taking part in that procession. Some of these horses indeed pulling that gun carriage that will carry the Queen's coffin. I'm joined now by Captain Amy Cooper from the King's Troop. Just tell us what you'll be doing, what this horse will be doing, Amy.
So on the day today, I will be the officer commanding the funeral gun carriage called the George Gun. This is Lego, his military name is Windsor. He will be one of the horses that will be in harness in the gun team, pulling Her Majesty from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall. So he is absolutely key to this procession, and he is a firm troop favourite. He's well rehearsed at this role, and he looks handsome while he's doing it.
I mean, you've done many ceremonial occasions. What's different about this one?
I think this will be the final tribute to Her Majesty the Queen. She's given us 70 years of completely selfless service, her strong ties with the armed forces. She's been our Commander-in-Chief. I think everybody feels the gravity of this very solemn day, and they want to be as professional as they possibly can be in this final tribute to Her Majesty the Queen. And we want it to be the best parade of our lives.
Have you done anything like this before?
So I was part of Op Forth Bridge. So when the Duke of Edinburgh died, I was on the gun position firing for his funeral. So I have some experience.
Do you have any personal memories of the Queen yourself?
Yes, I was very, very fortunate to have met Her Majesty the Queen on a couple of occasions. Most recently, the Gallop Through History at Royal Windsor Horse Show. I was lucky enough to sit in the Royal Box whilst she was also in there watching her horses on parade and all of the acts that were put together for her Platinum Jubilee. Also very lucky the previous year at Royal Windsor Horse Show, my subsection, we won Best Gun Team for that year. a silver plate was created and Her Majesty presented it to myself and Sergeant Jenks, who's also riding on this parade, at a ceremony at Royal Windsor Horse Show.
I think you're telling me that all these horses have been specially chosen because they're dark horses that reflect the sombre mood of the occasion. I just wonder, you know, you're going to have the eyes of not just the nation but the world on you. How does it feel to be taking part in something as important as this?
I feel extremely proud, extremely privileged that I can be a part of this final tribute. You know, you've seen the hundreds of thousands of people that have turned out to pay their last tribute. You know, testament to how well loved Her Majesty the Queen is by the whole of the UK and the whole of the world. So, you know, the soldiers that have been selected for this, they are our very best. They're our very best horses. Part of F subsection, which we use for state funerals. The hundreds of hours, you know, up all night cleaning the kit. I've never seen such motivated and dedicated soldiers as we have at the King Street Royal Horse Artillery. I have absolutely complete faith that they will do an amazing job today. You know, it's a lot of pressure, some very young soldiers, but I have every confidence that they're the right people for this job.
Well, we wish you the very best in that procession, which, as we say, will take place, the start of it at 2:22 precisely, making its way down the Mall through Horse Guard, through Whitehall to the Palace of Westminster. And for each minute there will be a gun salute, 38 rounds fired in all, before the Queen arrives there to lie in state at Westminster Hall. Now back to you, Sally.
Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. And I can tell you, if you're watching at home, there's a real change in atmosphere here today. There's a real sense that after those images that we saw last night of the Queen's coffin arriving here and going through the gates of Buckingham Palace in the darkness last night, there are crowds here this morning to pay their respects. I've that incredible image there. We see her going into Buckingham Palace for one last time, where she's lain at rest overnight. And for just a few more hours, she will be there in the most private place she can be. We know members of the family are there. We know her chaplains have been there overnight. And as we see the cortege move through this arch now, there are no images of what happens next, because we know what happens next was for the family, for her staff, for her closest advisors, the military personnel who are there. And really the last few hours and the hours ahead are the last moments for them to pay tribute to her. Before, as we said, she belongs to the nation again. And that's going to happen in a very precise way this afternoon. 22 minutes past 2. The coffin will leave Buckingham Palace and start that journey, the procession that has been planned and practiced over the last several days. Well, here at Buckingham Palace, I'm joined now by broadcaster and author Giles Brandreth, who knew the Queen, was a friend of her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. Morning again, Giles. Thank you so much for coming back to us.
It's good to be here. It's wonderful to be here on each of these days.
Different today.
Well, it's different every day. I'm conscious too that for some people they're not engaged in this. You know, it is not engaged everybody, but it has engaged most people. It's a week today since the Queen fell ill. There she was, extraordinary story. This remarkable 96-year-old, as we know, driven by duty, sustained by faith, kept happy by her dogs and her horses, fulfilling a week ago yesterday her official duties, saying goodbye to one Prime Minister, welcoming another, and then in the afternoon her horse winning her final race, the 320 at Goodwood, Love Affairs, 2-year-old filly, wonderful. And then a week ago today she fell ill, her last illness. And here we are, a strange atmosphere today, as you say, a stillness now. And I think partly was because I was here last night when the coffin arrived back. And it's rather like, I think, if you go to a family funeral, it's the moment when you see the coffin that you're taken aback. Suddenly then you thought everything's all right, and then the tears well up. And to stand here as that coffin, the design of which, the hearse, the design of which the Queen herself apparently had approved and wanted to ensure that it was visible all round, so that, as it were, she could be seen even to the last. It was deeply moving. And this is both a public day and, of course, a private day. You think of her children, who are doing, as it were, what she did all her life. There they are, no tears in public, doing their duty, absolutely delivering. And of course, you think of her close personal staff. She never ever referred to servants. She always talked about her staff. You think of them particularly, thinking of people like her personal page, Paul Waibu, her dresser, the person who gave her that look in recent years that was so distinctive that everyone recognizes, Angela Kelly. What it must be for people like that, and people like her ladies in waiting, somebody like Lady Susan Hussey, who I think was with her for more than 60 years. So for these people, it's so personal. But curiously, for everybody here, it's personal. Walking down from Green Park, even today at this hour in the morning, there are people still coming with flowers, feeling this personally. Extraordinary.
And where are we now? We're 9:15, aren't we? Still a few hours till those gates will open again and the procession starts again, and she's back out in public again.
She's back in public again and going to Westminster Hall, which is the oldest part of the Palace of Westminster, which is a royal palace. There are three key holders at the Palace of Westminster. One is the Lord Great Chamberlain, a new appointment because the Lord Great Chamberlain changes with each new reign. Then there is the Speaker of the House of Commons and the Speaker of the House of Lords. They are in charge there, where she's going to lie in state in Westminster Hall, built after the reign of William the Conqueror by William Rufus. History is there. Richard II created the hammer beam ceiling. Charles I was tried there. Charles III appeared there this week. It used to be where they held coronation feasts. I think the last coronation feast that was held there was for George IV. And then they abandoned the idea because it was considered to be a little bit too expensive. There was a cost of living crisis, believe it or not, at the beginning of the 19th century. But now this is the place where traditionally there is the lying in state, and people will file past over the next 4 days, as they did 20 years ago when the late Queen Mother was there. There have only been two civilians, I think, who have lain in state at Westminster Hall. One was a great Victorian soldier, Lord Roberts, VC, and the other was Sir Winston Churchill, the Queen's first Prime Minister, who lay in state.
And what do you expect that experience that is going to start later on today will be like for the members of the public who have joined that queue and will join that queue in their tens of thousands over the coming days?
This is working, I think, for members of the public, like you, like me. We are members of the public at several levels. We're both here because it's part of history. This is our island story. Like it or not, Republican or Royalist, our island story involves royalty, kings and queens, from 1066 and all that to the present day. The great figures of our history are people like Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, Richard III. These are names that we all know. So we feel that we're taking part in history. And this is Elizabeth the Great. And I think the reason that there is this great groundswell of emotion is that it's not only all our lives, literally all our lives. I was here for the coronation as a little boy on my father's shoulders. It's all our lives, but also she was clearly the most remarkable person. And in a world where there is so much that is bad, so much that is wrong, you know, if you watch the news today, there is news from Ukraine. There is so much that goes on in the world that is dark and difficult. Here was somebody who was an exemplar of goodness. That's what she was. A good, decent, discreet woman of integrity and consistency. And people, I think, are reaching out to that and valuing that and thinking, yes, somebody good. And she was clearly the best, and she has brought out the best in all of us.
Giles, I think that is the perfect point to leave it. Thank you so much. Thank you for those lovely words, Giles Brandreth. Well, let's go from Buckingham Palace now over to John, who is in Westminster. And John, An emotional and an historic day lies ahead of us all.
Yeah, emotional, but also logistically complex, and there's an awful lot of security here, a massive effort in place to manage what's going to happen over the next few days, because we know that the Queen's coffin will be brought here to the Palace of Westminster at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and then from 5 this afternoon the public will be able to file into that building and pay their respects, file past the coffin. And that white tent doesn't really do it justice. It's a huge structure there. That's for the security, so everybody who's going into the building and who wants to go past the coffin will have to go through that sort of airport style security to make sure that inside and outside everything is in place. And people are queuing already. They've been queuing since yesterday through the night in pouring rain on the other side of the River Thames, on the other side of Lambeth Bridge. And our correspondent Tim Muffet is with some of the people there. And Tim, as you've been there this morning, the queue growing all the time.
Yes, growing in number, as you say, whilst we've been on air. I'd say it's well over 1,000 now, possibly more. And it'll be continuing all the way down the south side of the River Thames, as you can see behind me. But within the queue, it's a really extraordinary feeling, actually, because many strangers are meeting for the first time, friendships are being forged, and a lot of people sharing their experiences and their feelings as to why they are here. Now, Ethan, you've come from Birmingham, haven't you? Why are you here today? Why is this so important for you to be a part of this?
I think the main thing is the Queen has dedicated the past 70 years to the country and, you know, a lot of the world. And I think a lot of people here, this is our little bit to say thank you. You know, people won't remember us, but they'll remember what happened today and over the next week, you know, so it's a massive thing for everyone.
Strangers are meeting, aren't they? Friendships are being forged.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant, and I think it's so British, you know, like people have been saying, you know, it's almost like the Queen is here. Everyone has come together almost as a family, and I think it's really, really nice.
Let's have a quick chat to Linda. Now, Linda, you saw those images, didn't you, of the Queen's coffin arriving back in London last night? Extraordinary, weren't they? What impact did it have on you?
It's hard to put it into words. It really is hard. It's kind of like she's still working her magic. I mean, as they've said, we've never met. None of us have met before. Yet we have had some tears. We've been laughing, and you know, it's important. It's closure. The Queen's been the Queen all my life, and I'm not quite sure what it's going to be like.
5 o'clock, the queue will start moving. People will be able to start filing into Westminster Hall. I mean, how do you expect to feel when you do that?
Tearful. I think that's the closure. That you've got to see that, just to make it real.
Thank you, Linda. Appreciate you talking to us this morning. Now, Mark, like so many people, for you, this is just something you have to do, isn't it?
Yeah, I had to do it. I didn't have to do it. I wanted to do it. I watched on the Scottish TV when the Queen was lying in state, and I just thought, you know, I want to come down and do the same thing here. And it's been a bit of a party atmosphere all last night. We slept out all last night, but that'll become very sombre in a few hours' time, I'm sure, when we cross the water.
Yeah, and a lot of people are saying that they expect the mood to kind of become more sombre, because, as you say, it's been very friendly. People have been chatting, people have been sharing their stories, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I don't know what it'll be, another 3 hours or so, 6 hours, I think, and we'll change dramatically, and I'm looking forward to it, but it's closure, I think.
So many people have said that word, closure. I mean, what do you think you'll be feeling when you walk past her coffin?
I don't know. I really wouldn't know, but I'm sure. I'm not an emotional person, but I'm sure that it will come over me. So it's we'll see.
And finally, do you think that the organisation here is extraordinary, isn't it? The system is in place, wristbands have been issued so people can leave the queue and come back, and they do. Have you been struck by how well organised it is?
It's absolutely wonderful. I'd highly recommend people come in and do this. I don't want to flood London with visitors, but I'd highly recommend it. I think it's the sort of thing that I wanted to do, and I would have been very cross with myself if I didn't do it. So yeah, I'm glad I've done it now, doing it.
Mark, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning. Well, the queue is getting bigger and bigger as we speak. It's stretching all the way down, and as we've been hearing this morning, John, as you've been saying, it'll be making its way past the London Eye, past London Bridge and all the way down to Southwark Park, if indeed it does get that long. Remember, the last member of the royal family to lie in state was the Queen Mother in 2002, and then some 200,000 people filed past her coffin, and it is widely assumed that the number for Queen Elizabeth will exceed that. So many stories we've been hearing this morning, so many people meeting for the first time and sharing their thoughts about Queen Elizabeth. And it's just a few hours now until this queue will start moving and people will be able to start filing past her coffin.
Yeah, Tim, it's a really important point that, isn't it? If people turn up in these numbers, because the authorities don't really know what they're going to be dealing with. They're preparing for the massive crowds that they suspect will come, but how those crowds are staggered over the next few days, we don't know, and how London copes with that in terms of transport and security, accommodation, we'll have no idea until it absolutely happens. It's a suitably gloomy morning here in London today. It's been pouring with rain, as those people who've been out in it all night know only too well. But if you're watching this morning and you're feeling sad and you're in need of a smile, and I think so many people feel that now, we've got something for you now that will make you smile, because there has been a recurring theme over the last few days among the flowers and the cards left for Her Majesty. You know who? Paddington Bear, after that unforgettable sketch during the Platinum Jubilee back in the summer. And our entertainment correspondent Colin Patterson has been speaking to the daughter of Paddington's creator, Michael Bond.
Here, there, Paddington Bear. Even a marmalade sandwich for a monarch. From Balmoral to Buckingham Palace, Michael Bond's much-loved children's character has become a widespread part of tributes to the Queen.
This is very special. It's my father's original notebook that he had when he started writing A Bear Called Paddington.
And the writer's daughter is in no doubt as to why people are using a bear to show they care.
One of the last times most of us saw the Queen close up was when she did that marvellous sketch during the Jubilee celebrations. And because that was the final image of the Queen for many people, that's what they remember. And so they associate her with Paddington.
I always keep one for emergencies.
So do I. I keep mine in here.
It's causing the royals some problems. We're hearing they're sort of saying, please don't bring any more cuddly toys or marmalade sandwiches.
Well, it is a bit worrying, really, thinking what's going to happen to them, to all of them. Perhaps if people started, instead of leaving the bears, which is a wonderful thing to do and a very kind thought, but perhaps leaving messages instead and maybe making a donation to one of the Queen's favourite charities.
And your father had his own long-standing links with the Queen.
He did, because my father worked for the BBC, and when the Queen's coronation took place, my father was actually working on the outside broadcast, so he was at Westminster Abbey for the Queen's coronation.
One particular Paddington picture has been repeatedly shared on social media. Eleanor Tomlinson from Willerby, East Yorkshire, first went viral after the Platinum Jubilee. This week, people have returned to her work.
I'm not really an emotional person, but I was very teary looking at the photos, because it's one thing to see something online and being shared and the lovely comments, but to see it in that kind of setting amongst a sea of flowers and tributes is just something completely else.
And at the railway station, which gave Paddington his name, people believe he's the perfect bear for this moment in history.
I think that it's marvellous that the opportunity to engage children with this as well, and a lot of children had done pictures with the Queen and Paddington, and one that just caught my eye and I took a picture of it. It just said, "Paddington, I've done my best, now take me to my husband."
Paddington is this British bear who loves London, who loves the marmalade, who loves the Queen, loves the royal family. I don't really know what it is. It's pretty nice though, isn't it?
I think he represents the best in all of us, the simpler side of humanity.
Thank you for everything.
That's very kind.
Colin Patterson, BBC News, Paddington.
There you go. I told you we'd give you something to smile about this morning, didn't I? If you're having your marmalade this morning and your breakfast, hope you enjoyed that. It's kind of duffel coat weather this morning in London. It's really quite chilly and it's a bit wet, but I don't know what it's going to be like for the rest of the UK. Matt can tell us. Morning, Matt.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, once again, a lot of dry weather around today for the vast majority. Southern areas, though, we start off with rain before things gradually brighten up. Let's concentrate on southern areas to begin with. Lots of cloud air around the English Channel. Some rumbles of thunder near the Channel Islands. Heaviest rain along the south coast towards the southeast. But notice how that fizzles out into the afternoon, and we'll see some sunnier conditions develop for most as we head into the end of the day. As for the rest of the UK, some dense patches of fog. Midlands, northern England gradually clearing. Same too in northeast Wales. More cloud around some of these western areas, especially for Northern Ireland, could produce the odd shower. A few showers in northern Scotland, quite a stiff breeze. Feeling rather cool here, but elsewhere, most places this afternoon will be dry with some sunshine around. Temperatures already dropping for the northern half of the UK. Not too bad in the south. Warm enough in the sunshine, 22 or 23 the high. This evening and overnight, though, it will be a much fresher night. Cloud down through eastern districts of England could produce the odd shower, stopping temperatures dropping here too much. But in the clearer conditions, the north and the west, well down into single figures in rural parts, maybe as low as around 2-3 degrees in parts of rural Scotland. So a chilly start to tomorrow. A lot of dry weather around, a lot of sunshine too. The cloudiest conditions probably down through some eastern parts of southern England. Small chance of a shower. Greater chance of a shower in northern parts of Scotland. A noticeable breeze. So out of the sunshine, it will feel much cooler, and that cooling trend continues into Friday. That's how it's looking. Back to you.
Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with me, Sally Nugent, at Buckingham Palace, where the Queen's coffin has spent the night, and John Kay in Westminster. Our headlines this morning. Queen Elizabeth II will make her final journey from Buckingham Palace this afternoon. Crowds braved the rain to greet the coffin as it arrived back from Edinburgh last night.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, the procession will make the short journey up the Mall to here at the Palace of Westminster later, where the Queen will then lie in state until Monday, the morning of her funeral. And hundreds of thousands of people are expected to pay their respects over the next 4 days. The queues have already begun to form.
In other news this morning, the spiralling cost of living continues, but the latest inflation figures show prices aren't rising quite as fast.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, September the 14th. You're watching BBC Breakfast from Buckingham Palace, where Her Majesty the Queen laid at rest overnight. This afternoon, starting at precisely 2:22, her coffin will be moved from here to Westminster Hall, about a mile away, where she will lie in state. And an estimated 400,000 people will file past to pay their respects before her funeral on Monday. Well, today on Breakfast, we're going to bring you all the latest news and images from here at the Palace, from Westminster, and from the growing queue. And we'll hear more memories from those who met and knew the Queen. First, our reporter Dan Johnson on Her Majesty's final journey to London from Scotland.
A cheering crowd in the capital city. This has been the focus of much of the nation's grief. And it is Buckingham Palace, more than anywhere, which is so closely associated with the Queen. For so long, her place of work and her official home. Her coffin arrived at 8 o'clock last night, ending the journey from Scotland. In pouring rain, on a dark night, people were determined to give her a welcome.
Felt we had to just come and pay our respects. We was lucky enough to see the hearse pass us, and we've just seen King Charles leave the palace.
Really nice that the flag's flying for her to be back home.
Like she's home, yeah.
Yeah, really nice.
The Queen's coffin is resting here overnight and will then be taken to the Palace of Westminster later today. This is really a last chance for the royal family to be together in private, to share a personal moment with the Queen's coffin before the public lying in state ahead of her funeral on Monday. This was the last leg of the long journey that began at Balmoral. A guard of honour from the Queen's Colour Squadron, silent and solemn in greeting at RAF Northolt. Princess Anne said she'd been fortunate to share her mother's last 24 hours, and it had been an honour and a privilege to witness the love and respect along these final journeys. So then, the drive to the centre of the capital. This was the A40. The car stopped, the people stood. A column of flashing lights illuminated a gloomy evening. The official state hearse was specially designed in consultation with Her Majesty to give the public the clearest view through fading light. For mile after mile, through underpasses and across flyovers, this was the journey back to the city where the Queen was born, where she was crowned, where she reigned over the kingdom and the Commonwealth. And the closer they drew to her official residence, the heavier the rain, but the bigger the crowds. Down Park Lane and past Hyde Park Corner to the place the Queen knew best. Buckingham Palace was familiar before being Queen was even her destiny. As a girl, she played here, and as a mother, it's where she raised her family. It was not, though, where she felt most at home. She regarded it as living above the shop, for this is where she dedicated herself to the business of state. Papers read, banquets hosted, addresses given, the garden parties, the Christmas messages, and the Jubilee celebrations. When she waved and then turned from the palace balcony this summer, many felt her reign was nearing its end. And last night, her coffin was placed in the Bow Room, where the new king met high commissioners and government ministers over the weekend. Then this afternoon, the procession will leave Buckingham Palace at 2:22. The Queen's coffin carried on a gun carriage of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. Crowds will watch as the cortege makes its journey through central London, along the Mall to Horse Guards, then down Whitehall to Parliament Square and into New Palace Yard, ready for the lying in state in Westminster Hall. Members of the public will be able to see the Queen's coffin guarded by soldiers from 5 p.m. until 6:30 on the morning of her funeral. And this is the route along which people will queue, from Southwark Park, along the Thames, up the South Bank and across Lambeth Bridge.
We are expecting extremely large queues that could go up to 30 hours. And it won't be 30 hours for everybody, but I think it's important that before people set off that they know just how long it could take, potentially. So we are supporting people throughout the queue, working with a number of partners, like the Samaritans, like the Red Cross, also having stewards there as well, and working with the Metropolitan Police. So there'll be over 1,000 people per day who will be on hand to support people, to offer them advice, guidance.
And despite the weather, some were prepared to stay out all night.
Yeah. It's sad. It's very sad. Very, very sad, isn't it? Really sad. But so pleased we came. And we're going to stay tonight and watch tomorrow.
There's determination here to show gratitude, respect and support for the royal family, as their private grief gives way to the public demands of national mourning and the rituals of the highest of state occasions conducted in the name of the people. Dan Johnson, BBC News at Buckingham Palace.
We're joined now by our royal correspondent Sarah Campbell. And Sarah, you've been in Scotland the last few days, you travelled down here to London, and right now, standing here this morning, it does feel like we are now counting down to one particular moment, aren't we?
And there have been a few moments over the last few days. That moment when the Queen's coffin first emerged from the gates of Balmoral, when she arrived in Edinburgh into St Giles Cathedral. And this morning, this afternoon, in 5 hours, I was just standing here looking at the balcony there, thinking that, gosh, in 5 hours, the Queen is going to leave Buckingham Palace for the very last time. And that will be a moment. You look at that and you think, gosh, from her childhood, the coronation of her father on the balcony, her wedding on the balcony, her own coronation, jubilees, every year the trooping the colour when the family all stand on the balcony. This building is so symbolic for the British nation and is so intrinsically linked to the Queen. and she will be leaving at 2:22 this afternoon. So there will be, it's a small, quite a personal procession. We'll leave through the gates of Buckingham Palace. The coffin will be borne on a gun carriage, and walking behind the coffin will be the King, his 2 sons, her younger children, so the male members of the royal family, and then in a car behind, the new Queen Consort, the Countess of Wessex, the new Princess of Wales, Meghan the Duchess of Sussex. And it will be a slow procession, due to take 38 minutes, going down the Mall. No music, so it's not a big military event that we're normally used to seeing on the Mall. The guns will be fired in Hyde Park, Big Ben will toll, and I think that will be a real moment. And you get the sense from the people on the Mall, it's a very quiet, very respectful atmosphere at the moment, and I think will be, as it was last night, I think you saw the emotion in the people as the Queen's hearse arrived here. I think it will be like that this afternoon.
And of course, this is not the first time that we will have seen the now Prince of Wales and Prince Harry walk behind a coffin in procession like this. I'm thinking of when their mother died and they were just very, very young children, and they have spoken, and Prince Harry has spoken about how traumatic that event was for him. So we can sense the emotion even from the crowd, but actually let's not forget what an occasion this is for all of those people who'll be walking behind the Queen's coffin today.
It's that, it's a private moment for the family. It's a very public, global event happening, but it is a private family happening as well. So when the hearse pulled in yesterday into Buckingham Palace, all the family were inside, and they have been able to spend private time inside the palace. But as you say, just after 2 o'clock this afternoon, they in a sense have to hand that private grief and make it public again. And they will have to make this, walk. And I'm sure it will be a very difficult moment for them. Of course it will be a very difficult moment for them, but they have talked about the comfort that they have received from the affection that the British public has shown to their mother in the places that she's been at the moment. And we saw Harry and William, didn't we, at the walkabout that they did at Windsor Castle a few days ago. So yeah, it's what the royal family does. Private moments, but they have to make them public.
You mentioned the hearse that brought Her Majesty's coffin yesterday. A very, very specifically designed vehicle that we believe, she had a hand in herself, lit from inside so that everybody could see her. Again, as we could in life, we could see her here in death. And how much of the next few days will we see her own hand involved in all of this?
She will have been consulted. She will have known about the plans. And as you say, with the hearse there, she spent her life making sure that even in a vast crowd of people, her small, tiny figure could be seen. She wore the bright colours. And so that was the thinking behind the hearse. Mainly glass, as you say, lit from inside, so you could see her, even as it went along the, the busy roads, in the dark, in the rain yesterday, you could still see that coffin so clearly. And of course, she will now be lying in state until Monday morning, until the day of her funeral. And people are already queuing. They may have to wait many, many, many hours, but hundreds of thousands of people expecting to come and just spend those few final moments with the Queen over the next few days.
Sarah, thank you very, very much indeed. And it was interesting, wasn't it? We saw the contrast of the coffin leaving Balmoral, where you were, the beautiful scenery of Scotland, arriving into the gritty reality of West London yesterday, and again the journey continues today. John is in Westminster, where Her Majesty's coffin will be taken this afternoon, and John, very much a sense of anticipation building.
Absolutely, and London changing, Sally, because in the course of the next few hours, security will be increased. In the last few moments, we've seen road closes, we've seen diversions being put in place. Some of our guests who've come to speak to us over the last couple of hours on breakfast this morning have struggled to get to us because it's been really difficult just moving around the capital, certain parts of the capital, because of this massive logistical operation. It's going to be quite a challenge for the authorities, not just today as the coffin is moved from Buckingham Palace here to Westminster Hall, but then in the days ahead, managing those crowds, potentially hundreds of thousands of people who are going to come here to file past the coffin. So what we thought we'd do in the next few minutes is just try and go around London and try and talk to our correspondents in different areas to get a sense of the crowds and what's happening right now. And our correspondent Nick Beake is on the Mall, which of course, Nick, is a place that we associate with royal celebrations over the years. But this morning, the mood there very different among people already waiting.
Good morning once again, John. Yeah, it certainly is. If you think about the Mall, it's a national thoroughfare. It's a road that can convey the mood of a nation, really, whether that's sorrow or joy. Just a few months ago, at this very spot, we had all those floats and buses passing through here, the singing for the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. As you say today, the mood is sombre. You can hear, just for a moment, quiet conversation, not a huge amount of talking. Some people have been here for many, many hours and chatting to people. They've come from Cornwall, Doncaster, all over the place. Everyone has been saying they wanted to come here to pay their respects. And this is what it's like this morning. If you've come here to queue, you've still got another 5 hours or so before the Queen's coffin passes by. I want to introduce you to two people now, Sylvia and Veronica. You can see from their medals that they've served in the armed forces. Can I just ask you, Veronica, the moment when the Queen's coffin passes by later on, have you had a chance to think about what your emotions will be at that point?
One of reverence, really. It'll be quite a sorrowful moment, but you know, it's lovely that everyone is here to pay their respects, and that's the important thing. But it will be sorrowful, but everybody is here to pay their respects, and that's very important to me.
Sylvia, we've heard over the past few days so many people say they appreciate how the Queen has served the country. Yeah. You've served your country in the Gulf War and elsewhere. What was it like having the Queen as your Commander-in-Chief?
It's very important. The monarchy and the Queen, and in fact the future King, is really important, especially to people who've been in the armed services. We used to say, I am your obedient servant. And so that's how we see the Queen. And King Charles III will be the same. It's really important to have a monarch. And as you say, our Commander-in-Chief of the armed forces. And if you look, all the comments that I see that come from the British Army, be they men, women, young and old, they're all fully respect Her Majesty the Queen and are heartbroken that she has passed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And for you, when you look back on the Queen's long life, is there something in particular that stands out for you, or is it really that the years of service as a whole that will be her legacy?
I just think that she's been a wonderful role model for all of us, really. I think everybody across the UK and the whole world really are just full of admiration for the way she has led the Great Britain and the country. So I think she's a wonderful role model. Her leadership has been incredible.
Over the last few days, we've seen the crowds cheering for Prince Charles, impromptu renditions of the national anthem. Yes. Today it does feel a little different, though, more reflective, more sombre.
It is a little more sombre, but I think in their hearts people will rejoice at the legacy that has been left by the Queen that will continue through Charles and the rest of the royal family.
OK, well, look, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning on Breakfast. And of course, the Mall is a place where we've had the Jubilee celebrations down the years. Every year, of course, it's the finishing point for the London Marathon, and so maybe it's fitting that as Her Majesty comes to the end of her own extraordinary life, what a journey that has been, that so many people are coming out today to bid her farewell and to pay their respects to her.
Absolutely, Nick. Thank you very much indeed. And those crowds on the Mall will see the procession of the coffin leaving Buckingham Palace, travelling down the Mall where Nick is, to Trafalgar Square and then along Whitehall, the centre of politics here in London, close to Downing Street. And our correspondent Ellie Price is there. And Ellie, crowds there as well.
Yeah, they've been building ever since early this morning when we got here about 5 o'clock this morning. This is, as you say, the last leg of the procession. It comes down Whitehall just before 3 o'clock. It will pass Downing Street. Of course, Liz Truss, the 15th Prime Minister that the Queen formally appointed, and of course met her just a couple of days before she died. Crowds gathering, as you say, and I've got the Browning family here who've been here since about 6 o'clock this morning when it was dark. 3 generations of you. Jessica, you're 9 years old, aren't you? How are you feeling about today?
It's quite exciting to see this all up close, but it's very sad that she passed away because she was a very great queen.
And Toby, you're missing school for this today, but of course it's you think, a very important moment.
Yeah, this is going to go down in history for sure, for like thousands of years. So didn't want to miss out on it, and it's really sad but exciting at the same time.
And Dad Stuart, I mean, as I say, it's a momentous moment. These guys are going to remember it for the rest of their lives, aren't they?
They are, yes. I mean, these events only come once in a lifetime, if less than that. So we got up early. We came down here to pay our respects, say thank you, and say goodbye.
And Valerie, this is the end of a big journey for you because you remember the sort of beginning of it all, don't you?
Yes, I watched the coronation on a little tiny screen, and I just felt that I needed to come down here, pay our respects, and round it off, at the end, really.
And of course, you guys are queuing up to watch this procession. You had thought you might like to queue up to do the lying in state too, but this may be enough for you.
Well, yes, we're going to see how long it takes to get down in the queue for the lying in state. Otherwise, we might come up at the weekend.
Okay, fine. Well, as I say, there are lots of people here now lining the streets, and I've got Kate from Bedfordshire. There's a special story about your flowers, isn't there?
Yes, I've got some sunflowers here. They were grown by my 6-year-old son, Arthur. He was given the seeds for the Jubilee, and he wanted me to cut them this morning and bring them here to give back to the Queen, so yes.
So you're going to make sure you take a nice photo of it as well?
Yes, exactly, yes.
And he's at school, is he?
He's at school today, yes. I'm here with my sister and my nephew. We actually met the Queen in Bedfordshire when Tom was very young. I was able to do a little posy for her when she opened the council offices in Bedfordshire. So that was 2006. So we saw her then. Amazing. So yeah, she's been remarkable.
Well, everyone has, of course, their special memories of the Queen. That's why people are here. I think it's probably worth pointing out too that, of course, the procession will go past the cenotaph. There were only 3 occasions in her 70-year reign that she missed a Remembrance Day. So, as I say, it's a sort of bittersweet moment, very symbolic journey that she'll be making just that short distance down to Westminster Hall.
Ellie, thank you very much indeed. And Arthur, if you're back from school now and watching this on the BBC iPlayer later today, lovely sunflowers, well done. What a great thought you had. Thank you very much indeed. Well done, Arthur. So the coffin comes down to Westminster this afternoon at 3 o'clock. We'll be here for 4 days. People will be able to file past it until Monday morning, and Westminster Hall will be open day and night during that time. Not quite clear, and the authorities don't know how the crowds are going to be managed during that time. But if you are thinking about coming to London, if you want to pay a tribute in that way, this is what you want to know, because hundreds of thousands of people are expected to queue up and pay their respect. There is an extensive area that has been set up to manage the potential demand, and the front of the queue right now is being held on the other side of the River Thames, on the south, the Albert Embankment side at Lambeth Bridge. And as more people join, that line will stretch all the way along the south of the Thames, going past Tate Modern and London Bridge before winding its way to Southwark Park. And the government is warning that if it gets that long, then mourners could face a wait of up to 30 hours, particularly, they're guessing, over the weekend. Now, there will be a wristband system in operation, which will mean that you can leave the queue to get food and drink and use the loo and then return to your place. But you won't necessarily be able to sit down during that time. It's going to be moving all the time, 24 hours a day. There is a separate accessible route as well for people with mobility difficulties. If you look on the government website and on the BBC News app and on the BBC News website, you'll see more information there, more maps there about exactly where you should go and when. And fingers crossed, and there's a lot of crossing of fingers of the authorities here at the moment, it'll all work out and London will be able to cope, because it creates all sorts of issues with transport and accommodation and security. Lots of soldiers walking around, police officers, armed police here now in attendance all around Westminster. The weather is crucial for anybody who's planning to come to London. We saw pouring rain during the night, but no complaints from anyone we've heard in the crowd. Matt's got the forecast for London and the whole of the UK. Hello, Matt.
Thank you. Good morning. Another dry and reasonably sunny day for the vast majority today, but different story across southern areas. We start with cloud and outbreaks of rain this morning before things brighten up. Cloud there on the satellite imagery at the moment, but at long last it's starting to take a shift southwards and eastwards. That said, if we concentrate on southern areas to begin with, outbreaks of rain, particularly around English Channel coast in the southeast, some heavy bursts around, rumbles of thunder close to the Channel Islands, but notice how most of that will fade away through the day. Sunnier conditions will develop from the north. As for the rest of the country today, a few mist and fog patches around across the Midlands, northern England especially. They will clear by mid-morning. A bit more cloud around some of these western areas, particularly Northern Ireland, Irish Sea coast. The odd shower here. A few showers in northern Scotland too, but many places will be dry with some sunshine this afternoon, but feeling a bit cooler than recent days, with the breeze picking up in the north, whereas further south we'll see temperatures actually a bit higher than yesterday. More sunshine, 22 or 23. Into this evening and overnight, areas of cloud running down through eastern counties of England could just bring the odd shower. More showers in northern Scotland, but with clearer conditions developing for many, it's going to be an even fresher night than we've had so far. Temperatures could get as low as 3 or 4 degrees in some parts of Scotland, still staying in double figures further south. And then beyond that, well, let's start with a look at London. A lot of eyes on the capital over the next few days. Dry weather, just a small chance of a shower, but temperatures dropping by day and by night. These are nighttime temperatures compared to how we started this week. By the time we hit the weekend, some rather chilly starts with temperatures in single figures. And that cooler air is coming in from the north for all of us as we go through the next few days. The chance of a few showers comes through little areas of cloud running down through the eastern coast and along the North Sea. We could see a bit more cloud, in fact, through East Anglia, South East tomorrow. Only a small chance of a shower here. Greater chance of a shower in northern parts of Scotland. Isolated ones in the west. Most of you tomorrow, though, having a dry day, sunshine around, but already temperatures starting to drop. Pleasant enough in the sunshine, but it's out of it. You'll probably notice it more than anything else. Only 11 to 13 degrees in northern Scotland, 18 or 19 in the south. Cooler still into Friday. Greater chance of some heavier showers running down eastern counties of England. Again, very close to London, mainly though towards the east of London itself. Further north and west, most places will be dry, but we will see those temperatures continue to drop way down on what we normally expect for this stage in September. Feeling cool as well this weekend in the cloudier moments. Isolated showers. Most places, though, will be dry.
Matt, thank you. Good morning. More from John and Sally in a moment, but first let's take a look at some of the other news stories this morning. New figures from the Office for National Statistics have shown a slight fall in inflation last month. Ben has all the details this morning. What can you tell us, Ben?
Well, this drop is something of a surprise, John. And when we talk about inflation, what we're talking about is the change in the average prices that we pay for goods and services. So the price is now compared to what they were a year ago. And we found out this morning that in August, the rate of inflation stood at 9.9%. That means average prices are still going up, and quite steeply, but not quite as steeply as they were in July. It's still close to the highest it's been for 40 years. And as always, that figure is an average. So some things will have become even more expensive, gone up even more quickly. Other things may have gone up by less. And we can drill down a little bit. We get some of that detail. For example, petrol and diesel prices fell between July and August. So that has helped to bring the overall rate of inflation down. But I'm sure people will have noticed this bit. Food and non-alcoholic drinks actually went up even more steeply on average in terms of their prices in August. And that's keeping inflation at a level that's a lot higher than is considered to be ideal. In fact, grocery prices are rising at their fastest since 2008. That's according to the market analysts Kantar. And that's one of the biggest drivers that's been pushing inflation up over the recent months. Now, we heard yesterday that average wages are just not keeping up with average price rises. And when you factor in inflation, in real terms, wages fell by 2.8% in the year up to July. Of course, if prices or inflation are going up faster than your wages, things feel more expensive. Your money just doesn't go as far. Some people have had wage rises, but certainly not everybody. The government will be hoping that its plans to cap energy bills for the next 2 years for households will keep a lid on inflation, stop it from getting too much higher. The other factor when we talk about inflation to consider is what the Bank of England does. It likes inflation to sit at 2%. We're way, way above that. And when inflation's high, it tends to raise interest rates to try and bring the inflation level down. The main interest rate went up in August. The expectation is it will go up again. The meeting's been postponed because of it was meant to be this week. It's been postponed because of the period of national mourning until after the Queen's funeral. We'll find out the latest decision on interest rates next week. And of course, higher interest rates, more expensive mortgages, more expensive loans, more expensive household bills.
And looking to next week and the Queen's funeral on Monday, which we know is a bank holiday, it's being left to businesses to decide whether or not they close.
Yeah, and it's a tricky one to handle. Center Parcs, for example, has faced a backlash over the way it's handled the decision. Like many employers, understandably, it wanted to close for the day to give staff the time off to mark the Queen's funeral. Center Parcs had said that guests who were already on site at one of their parks would have to leave for 24 hours and then come back to resume their holiday. They also said people who were due to arrive on Monday would have to delay the start of their break by 24 hours. An angry reaction to that has forced a partial U-turn. The company is now saying people who are already there can stay on, but those who are due to arrive on Monday are still being asked to delay their arrival until Tuesday. So it's worth mentioning at this point that a lot of big chains will be closed on Monday. Major supermarkets, some cinemas, leisure centres. So if you do have plans for Monday, it's worth checking what the situation is as far as your own ones are concerned.
OK, Ben, thanks for that. Ukraine is continuing to recapture large swathes of territory in the Kharkiv region, but accusations of torture and brutality by Russian troops have been made in newly liberated areas. Our correspondent Hugo Bachega is in Kyiv. Hugo, what more can you tell us?
Well, John, we're starting to hear dramatic accounts from those villages that have been retaken by Ukrainian forces. And these are places that had been under Russian occupation since the very beginning of the war. There was a man who told our teams there that he was taken away by Russian forces after they found a picture of his brother in uniform. He said he was given electric shocks. We've heard from a pensioner who said he didn't leave the basement because he and his family were living in fear, and he said that Russian troops were taking people from the streets to be tortured. So now Ukrainian authorities are returning to those places, and they are now gathering evidence of possible war crimes committed by the Russians. But on the ground, Ukrainian officials say this counteroffensive continues. They feel they've got the momentum. We've heard from the Deputy Defense Minister saying that more than 300 communities have been retaken in the northeast of the country, more than 150,000 people now back in territory, Ukrainian-controlled territory. But I think the message remains the same. The Ukrainians are now telling Western partners that they can go ahead to reclaim territory, but they need more weapons.
Hugo Bachega live in Kyiv this morning. Thanks for that. Some staff at Clarence House have been warned their jobs are at risk following King Charles's accession to the throne. A royal spokesperson said some redundancies were unavoidable because of the change in role for Charles and his Queen Consort Camilla, who will now move to Buckingham Palace. The Guardian newspaper claims dozens of staff were told the news during the Thanksgiving service for the Queen in Edinburgh on Monday. The boss of Transport for London, which runs buses, tubes and some trains in the capital, has said the coming days will be the organisation's biggest ever challenge. The TfL Commissioner Andy Byford said the network had coped with enormous pressure in the past, like the London Olympics, but that it is much harder to predict moments. For Harry Kane and his Tottenham side faced Sporting Lisbon in Portugal, there was late drama there as well as they conceded two very news, travel and weather where you are.
Good morning, you are watching BBC Breakfast. Now, Her Majesty the Queen has just spent her final night here at Buckingham Palace. Her coffin was brought from Edinburgh yesterday evening, and huge crowds were here to witness that moment. Now, we're expecting even bigger crowds today when Her Majesty is taken from here to lie in state at Westminster Hall. Let's have a look at the route, shall we? The coffin will leave Buckingham Palace on a horse-drawn gun carriage at 22 minutes past 2 this afternoon. It will travel very slowly along the Mall, excuse me, across Horse Guards Parade and down Whitehall. The King and other members of the royal family will walk behind the carriage, and the procession will arrive at Westminster Hall at 3 o'clock. Now, the hall will then be open to the public from 5 o'clock, and we are expecting around 400,000 people to file past Her Majesty's coffin as she lies in state for the next 4 days and nights. Well, our correspondent Charlotte Gallagher has been in with the crowds this morning, large crowds of people waiting at Buckingham Palace when the Queen's coffin arrived last night. We are expecting those crowds to build through the day. Morning, Charlotte.
Morning, Sally. We are indeed. Even when I got here at 5 o'clock in the morning, it was pitch black. It was still very busy. People had camped overnight, some in tents, some just on chairs. And you can see the row of people waiting to see the Queen. It's pretty much single file only for people trying to get past. It's that busy. Let's talk to some of the people that have been here a very, very long time. Now, Zoe, you're from Cambridge. Yes. What time did you get here?
12:30 this morning.
And what was that like? Because I got here at 5 and it was very cold at 5.
Yeah, it's all part of the experience. I mean, I got the last train out of Cambridge, got here as soon as I could after a day at work. So, but I just didn't want to miss this opportunity to see a moment in history.
Because you're saying goodbye to her really today. She's coming out of Buckingham Palace for the last time. What will that mean to you to see her?
I mean, until it happens, I don't think anyone really knows kind of the emotion and how overwhelming it's going to be. She's dedicated her whole life to the Crown and the country and the Commonwealth, and I think that this is the least that we owe her, to kind of line the streets and give her the send-off she deserves.
Thank you. Let's talk to some people who've travelled from even further afield than Cambridge. Moira, you're here from New Zealand.
Yes, I'm here from New Zealand. I've been on here on holiday just under 2 weeks, and here for this occasion that's so sad, and I feel so special and so honoured to be here.
And you've bought some flowers and you've written a message for the Queen. What have you written on the message?
Just thank you so much, Your Majesty, Ma'am, Your Royal Highness, for all your devotion and commitment and selflessness, and I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I love you and always have, from the time you stepped off that plane from South Africa to the time you left Balmoral Castle. You've just been amazing, absolutely amazing.
And we know how much the Queen loved the Commonwealth, how special it was to her. So is it nice to be representing New Zealand, one of the Commonwealth countries?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I've seen her time and time when she's come to New Zealand and loved every moment. I'm a total royalist, and I just feel so special to be here and to, as you say, from New Zealand. How cool is that? How cool. And this is my friend Nettie, whom I'm staying with here in England. And yeah, she's so special to be here too.
How are you feeling about today?
Very emotional. I've been watching the TV for the last few days and just really, really privileged to be here, to actually be amongst everyone who's doing such a great job, all the security people, the police. It's just overwhelming. Our country do it so well. But the Queen, I was a coronation toddler, and she means so much, just as Moira says, echoing everything. She's been such a special Queen to us all, and it's just wonderful to be part of this crowd here, and I'm looking forward, if you can say that, to watching the procession.
And who would have thought when you were a toddler,
yes,
70 years later,
yes,
she'd be here and you'd be here, and the Queen would have done that job for all that time.
Yes.
It's incredible, isn't
We're
it?
similar I'm a similar age, in the 70s, so for me it's very, very emotional. I've just grown up knowing the Queen was our Queen, and it's really, really an honour to be here and to be part of it.
Thank you so much, ladies. And that's the real feeling we've got down here today from people, Sally. People just really honoured to be down here. They want to pay their respects to the Queen as she says goodbye to Buckingham Palace. I mean, what other building symbolises the Queen more than the building behind me? That balcony she's stepped out on so many times. And I'm sure there's going to be so much emotion from this crowd when she makes her final departure from Buckingham Palace.
Charlotte, thank you very much indeed. That's Charlotte Gallagher with the crowd. Just not too very far away from where I'm standing now, and even from where I am. I know you probably can't see it in this shot, but the crowds are building from the palace down the Mall, waiting for that moment at 2:22 when the cortege will leave Buckingham Palace one final time. John is in Westminster this morning, where Her Majesty's coffin will be taken this afternoon. And John, it's a really solemn occasion, I know, and there is a real sense here at the palace, I can, from people we've been talking to, there's a real sense of anticipation. You can sense the day is building.
You really can, can't you, Sally? Yeah, because of course businesses are still operating, politics is still happening here in Westminster. Life goes on for so many people, but yeah, the backdrop to all of this right now is what's going to happen on Monday, that huge state funeral. And the fact that later today Her Majesty's coffin is going to travel from where you are, Sally, at Buckingham Palace, 2:22, time to perfection to arrive here as Big Ben strikes 3 o'clock. That's when the coffin will get to Westminster Hall, and then from 5 o'clock this afternoon the public will be admitted to begin that process of filing through past the coffin to pay their respects, and that will remain the case for the next 4 days and nights. Westminster Hall will be open 24 hours a day to allow potentially hundreds of thousands of people to queue up to pay their respects. Let's talk you through it. So there's an extensive area that's been set up to manage the demand. It's not just around Parliament itself. The front of the queue is on the other side of the River Thames, over there across Lambeth Bridge to the Albert Embankment side, the south side of the Thames. And as more people join over the forthcoming days, that line is expected to stretch so much further and could go all the way along the Thames, past Tate Modern, past London Bridge, before winding its way all the way to Southwark Park if it gets as long as the authorities think it might. And the government's warning that if that happens, mourners could face a wait of up to 30 hours. There is going to be a wristband system in operation though, which would allow people to leave to get food or drink or use the loo if they have to. And some businesses have been told to stay open to provide provisions and facilities for people, so that should help. And there will be a separate accessible route for those who have mobility difficulties, because that queue is going to move all the time, so there won't be an option to sit down and wait for a moment. You'll have to be on your feet constantly, potentially for hour upon hour upon hour. That said, a lot of people, thousands of people, are clearly already prepared to do that. They're already waiting even 7 hours before the queue enters the Palace of Westminster. And Tim Muffet is at the front of the queue at Lambeth Bridge this morning with some of those people. And Tim, what are they saying to you? Some of them are tired already. They've been waiting through pouring rain overnight. Why do they say it's so important for them to be part of this right from the start?
Well, John, it's an extraordinary atmosphere here, and as we've been on air, the queue has been getting longer and longer. The atmosphere is friendly, it's good-natured, and as you say, there's a very well-organised system in place. Wristbands are being issued so people can temporarily leave the queue if they need to get some refreshments or such like. But so many people here are sharing their stories, sharing their memories, and sort of talking to each other about why they feel so compelled to come here. Let's have a quick chat to you guys. Why be here? Why commit this much time to file past the Queen's coffin?
We just wanted to be here to pay our respects, to feel part of the moment and not to miss it, because we know we'd regret it if we hadn't done that.
And the strangers are making friends, aren't they? People are meeting new people. What's the atmosphere been like overnight?
It's just really cordial. Everyone's speaking to each other and asking each other why they're here, and yeah, it's just a part of paying a respect to someone who's committed so much to our country. So,
as a younger person, how do you find it?
I just thought it was really cool to be like part of a historical moment, like, yeah.
Your new friend here in the queue, a queue neighbour.
I am a queue neighbour. So, yeah, great atmosphere. And, I mean, the Queen, absolutely incredible lady, served the country with dignity and grace, and just really happy to be here and part of history. And meet lots of nice new people.
Thank you all so very much. And a lot of people have been saying the atmosphere overnight and this morning has been at times quite upbeat, but people expect that when the queue starts moving at 5 o'clock this afternoon, things will become more sombre. Let's have a quick chat to you guys as well. I believe you've met for the first time, haven't you, in the queue?
We met in the queue this morning. I arrived from Bristol at 2 o'clock this morning, and these guys...
We're from Ealing.
Yes, so we met in the queue to be queue buddies, so we could go off to the bathroom and get cups of coffee.
And why be here? Why is this so important to you?
For me personally, it's emotional to be part of an event for the Queen. You know, everyone adores her, including myself, so just have that little bit of personal space with her, and just to give one last courtesy and say thank you.
And what do you think will be going through your mind as you file past the Queen's coffin?
I think for us, it's the last time we will ever have someone like this. So for us, it's sort of a deep emotion, and this is an honour for us to be here, to sort of show her respect and the royal family. Especially now, we've got a wonderful king, so we're here to show his, you know, all of us are here to support him and everyone else. So that's
the atmosphere here is extraordinary, isn't it? It's one of real camaraderie, people sharing their experiences, their stories, and their reasons for being here.
Yes. It's amazing seeing everybody. Everybody's being friends and helping each other, you know, so it's really nice.
And everyone's happy.
Yes,
it's
good spirits. Yes.
It's a wonderful spirit what you find sort of when you walk along here, and you can actually feel that, which is really good, which is nice.
And the organisation of it has been quite something, hasn't it?
Well, yes. On the way, I've got the obviously the megabus in this morning, and everything's all been cornered off and everything's been managed, you know, way before I arrived. And when I arrived this morning, the queue was all managed. It was easily set up, so easy to get my chair, get my drink, and get set. So, yeah. Luckily that we've met some guys that we can all stick together.
A lot of people meeting for the first time and making new friends. It's lovely to see that, isn't it? Thank you so much, Dee, for talking to us this morning.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it. So, as we've been saying, the queue is going to get longer and longer. It's going to stretch all the way along the south side of the River Thames, and many, many people here meeting for the first time, really brought together by this extraordinary event. And 5 o'clock this afternoon, that's when the queue will start moving. It will cross Lambeth Bridge over to the north side of the River Thames, and people make their way towards Westminster Hall to pay their last tribute to Queen Elizabeth. It's going to be quite a moment, and I think the mood within the queue will change sort of significantly as that hour approaches.
Yeah, Tim, that's what we saw in Edinburgh over the last couple of days as well. The queues there as people waited outside St Giles Cathedral, that at the back of the queue people were chatting and making friends, but as that time passed and they got closer and closer to the cathedral, it became quieter and more sombre, and people became more reflective. Let me just explain to you what will happen when people get here at Friday from 5 o'clock this afternoon. They will have to go through that large white sort of tented structure, temporary structure that's gone up in the last couple of days. That's security, and they'll go through airport style security before they're allowed actually inside the Palace of Westminster, inside Westminster Hall. And security is really tight. We've seen roads closed this morning, there are diversions in place, we've seen police marksmen on the tops of some of the buildings. This is a massive security operation, because as well as all those hundreds of thousands of members of the public, we're also going to have prime ministers and presidents and princes from all over the world coming here who will need special security as VIPs as well. We've just had a police sniffer dog coming around where we are, sniffing around our camera bags and around our breakfast as well. I'm glad to say we passed the test and we're okay. But Nick Eardley, our chief political correspondent, is here with us. Were you sniffed as well?
Yes, on the way in.
You're safe?
I think so.
I'm
think so.
glad
We've all
to
got
hear
our
it.
special bands to get in.
Good news. So Westminster Hall is going to be the focus, isn't it, this afternoon? That's where the lying-in state will take place. We're so used to seeing inside that building the House of Commons and the House of Lords, but tell us about Westminster Hall, because it's an equally important part of the building, isn't it?
I mean, the amount of history that's taken place in that hall is extraordinary. It's the oldest part of the parliamentary estate. It's almost a millennium old. It's obviously changed over the years. We saw it on Monday, of course, when King Charles arrived to hear from the speakers of both parliaments. But it has, over the years, been a real symbol of the relationship between Parliament and the monarchy. We've had a number of previous monarchs lay in state in Westminster Hall. Winston Churchill as well, when he died in 1965, he lay in state there. About 1 million people came through the doors at that point to see his coffin. And I think over the next 4.5 days, we are going to see another piece of history, because the expectation is we're going to see tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people coming through here in the next few days. The government's saying that at points it thinks it's possible, they don't know for sure, but it's possible that that queue could be as much as 30 hours long. But we are getting, I think, a real feeling of just how big a moment in British history this is. And when we see this afternoon the Queen's coffin brought to Westminster Hall, we see those queues start to go through the front door from 5 o'clock this evening. It is going to be quite a moment of grief, public outpouring of emotion.
As someone who works here and sort of lives and breathes the politics of Westminster, Nick, does it feel very different, this place, to you right now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, we stood here last week for the new Prime Minister, and
was that only last week? It feels like months ago now, doesn't it?
Normally this place is full of hustle and bustle and everybody's arguing. At the moment, all that's been put aside. We saw that with Sir Keir Starmer on the programme a couple of hours ago, when he was saying, look, it's a time for the country to come together. He feels that there's been that kind of sense of unity and people coming together over the course of the past few days. And, you know, all the normal arguments here have been paused. You know, the work of government still goes on. There are still things happening with the cost of living, for example. We'll probably hear more on that towards the end of next week. But certainly for the next few days, the role of this place completely changes, and it becomes about facilitating the lying in state, allowing people to come through Westminster Hall potentially in their hundreds of thousands.
OK, Nick, for now, thank you very much indeed. You can probably hear while Nick and I are talking. There's some building work going on just a short distance away. There's special platforms going up for security and also for the media, because there are media descending on London from all over the world as well for the coverage of that state funeral next week. That's all from me and the breakfast team here in Westminster, but Sally is at Buckingham Palace, where there was that emotional reunion last night, Sal, as the Queen returned to her home, and more historic scenes to follow later today.
Thanks very much indeed, John. Yeah, that emotional reunion, which of course happened through the arch here behind closed doors. We didn't see it, did we? Members of the Queen's family, her staff were here waiting as the cortege drove through the arch really slowly. And then there was the few hours up until 2:22 today when that all remains private. And then at 2:22, everything changes and the coffin will come back out again. Joined by Emily Andrews, former royal editor of the Mail on Sunday and The Sun. Morning, Emily.
Good morning, Sally.
We've seen so much in public, haven't we, over the last several days? What's going on behind the gates?
Well, first of all, the King Charles, came to Buckingham Palace last night before the arrival of the Queen. He actually held a Privy Council meeting here last night, confirmed a number of new members, including Sir Clive Alderton, his private secretary, and Kemi Badenoch, and the Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case, who used to be William's private secretary. Then there was that very personal moment when the Queen's coffin came from Northolt and she came home to Buckingham Palace. We're seeing that pendulum swing, you know, the public, the King Charles has still got these very important meetings, the Privy Council, very important, and then the personal, because just before the Queen arrived for the last time through those gates at Buckingham Palace, King Charles was waiting for her. There were no pictures inside, as you said, but he had his head bowed, and behind him were Harry and Meghan, their faces really etched with grief. As the Queen was received for the last time in Buckingham Palace, you could see that internally, the long corridor that stretches the back of Buckingham Palace, black drapes had been put up, there was a big altar, candles had been lit, the Queen was taken inside and she was put inside the bow room. Now the bow room, very poignant actually, because the bow room is on the ground floor of Buckingham Palace at the back and it overlooks the gardens. The Queen loved to walk in the gardens of Buckingham Palace. So lovely that her last night there, she was overlooking the gardens that she loved. She wasn't left alone. There was a private prayer ceremony with all the members of her family, presided over by Dame Sarah Mullally, and then the family had a private dinner at Buckingham Palace. Chaplains that the Queen had appointed, member of her ecclesiastical rota, stood guard over her all night until, of course, this afternoon, when she will leave Buckingham Palace for one last time.
And what about the next few days? How much will we see of the royal family in the coming days?
Well, again, there's that pendulum between the private and the public. I think we're going to see a lot of the royal family in the coming days. Obviously, there's that procession that we've talked a lot about this afternoon. The Queen will lie in state at the Palace of Westminster. We are going to see, we haven't had confirmation yet of when, but there will be another vigil of the princes. We will see King Charles, Prince Andrew, Princess Anne and Prince Edward take their positions at the four corners of the Queen's coffin. I think that will be incredibly moving. King Charles has also got the business of state to attend to. He'll be visiting Wales. He was the former Prince of Wales. We think he'll be visiting Wales on Friday. So we will be seeing a lot of the members of the royal family in the coming days.
Emily, thank you so much for your insight this morning. Thank you. Well, that's all from us on Breakfast today, but coverage continues on BBC News throughout the day, so do stay tuned as London prepares for one of the busiest and most historic occasions in the city's history. This is how it looks on the Mall right now, which forms part of the route Her Majesty, the Queen's coffin, will take as it leaves Buckingham Palace later on this afternoon. Millions of people will line the streets to watch that procession to Westminster Hall, a journey of 38 minutes, which will start at 2:22 precisely. Walking behind the coffin will be Her Majesty's 4 children, including the new King, Charles III, and his 2 sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. That's it from us on Breakfast. Goodbye.